Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon. Welcome to 2020. This is John Suntress. 2020 is Word Balloon's 15th year. Come May 10th, it will be Word Balloon's 15th anniversary officially. And I will be representing a bunch of great episodes from the Word Balloon archives leading up to May 10th. So I hope you'll enjoy those. Thanks a lot for listening today. Questions or comments about the show, reach me via email, john@wordballoon.com. You can follow me on Twitter under John Wordballoon, @JohnWordballoon, or under Facebook under my name, John Suntress, and, of course, the Word Balloon Network. So, great month. Really looking forward to what's going to happen this month in January. I thank you for being along on the ride. You might hear one more commercial before the show starts. Please listen to the commercials. Don't fast forward them. That's how I get paid. And I thank you for your support and your attention. One more spot, and then the show will begin. Thanks a lot for listening. Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. I am happy to welcome back Robert Meyer Burnett. I love Rob's Robservations YouTube channel. He does daily shows there, 7 days a week usually. Very rarely takes a day off. And does some really amazing stuff for being a guy just talking into his camera and talking about the nerd culture. I appreciate a lot of his opinions. Certainly Star Trek, that was our introduction to each other. But, things have evolved, and Rob and I are about, around the same age. I'm a little bit older than Rob, but he always says we've got one foot in the grave. But, we can't help but have opinions. I mean, we've been watching geek culture and consuming geek culture for decades. And, we've got our opinions on the current product. Certainly Star Trek Discovery is not one of our favorites, and we get into that. We also hold each other's hands in hopes for Star Trek Picard that's just coming out in a couple of weeks. I can't believe it. Very excited, but nervous as well. Can't deny it. And also, we talk about the HBO Watchmen series because Rob is a big comic book fan, and I know he had interesting thoughts on Watchmen. And I don't know, man. I think he makes you think whether you agree or not. And I really did think of things the way that Rob did. I really enjoyed it. Obviously, I did. You heard my voice just crack. I suddenly was 14 again. But these are among the subjects that we talk about, and it's great. I'm always happy to welcome Rob back. I think he's a good, deep thinker, and I appreciate his point of view. Robert Meyer Burnett on today's Word Balloon. It's all brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you, League, as always, for your great support via Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. That's where you can go if you'd like to subscribe to Word Balloon. Is Word Balloon worth $1 a month to you? Is it worth the price of a comic book? If you think you enjoy the content that I try to provide here each month, I appreciate the support. Thank you greatly for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. This episode of Word Balloon is brought to you by Aftershock Comics. They are shaking things up at your local comic shop right now with upcoming new titles coming out in January and February. How about John Layman's The Man Who Effed Up Time? That's coming in February. Zach Thompson's Undone by Blood and God Killers by Mark Sale. They go along with your other Aftershock favorites. Things like Animosity by Marguerite Bennett and Raphael De La Tour, Baby Teeth with Donnie Cates and Gary Brown, A Walk Through Hell from Garth Ennis and Goran Sudzuka, the full volume of Pestilence by Frank Thierry coming out this month from Aftershock Comics. Their catalog is filled with other great books as well by some of my friends that are great creators, people like Paul Jenkins, Tim Seeley, Cullen Bunn, and a lot more. Go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages, and how to get these books through the diamond codes through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. Before we get started, I should point out that Rob and I, of course, do talk a lot about Star Trek. We can't help it. We love Star Trek. We're not crazy about what's going on currently in Star Trek, but we love Star Trek. We talk about the 2 animated short treks from December. This was recorded on Sunday, the Sunday before the latest short trek finally appeared, Children of Mars. Rob has expressed his opinions of it on Friday's YouTube show of Robservations. But I will tell you now myself, I didn't like it. I don't know, man. I thought it was hokey. It had nothing to do with the main plot. I know these are separate things, but I don't understand why they do everything they can to get away from Star Trek. I don't know. It drives me crazy. I wasn't crazy about the animated ones, as you'll hear as well. But anyway, I wanted to point that out before you hear me and Rob talking and go, hey, how come you're not talking about the latest short trek that just aired? Anyway, Let's get into it now. Our conversation with Robert Meyer Burnett on today's Word Balloon. Robert Meyer Burnett, welcome back to Word Balloon. Great to talk to you as always, and happy 2020.
John, as you know, I'm a huge fan of yours, and it's always a great honor and privilege to be once again back on the Word Balloon podcast.
Well, I feel the same way, man, and I'm glad you always come back because we always have interesting conversations. I learn a lot. We are of the same age group. You're a little bit younger than me, but your knowledge is deep, and I always am thrilled when you remember the old shit that I remember. But I want to talk about new shit as well because interesting time. Award season has begun with the Golden Globes tonight as we're recording.
Yeah.
And I caught I had it on. I was working in radio, as I told you earlier, but I had it on with the sound down, so I was able to catch most of the winners. Surprised that The Irishman didn't do better in the Globes.
No, I think pretty much from all the major awards, it was shut out.
Yeah.
I was actually very surprised. There was, I think, a lot of upsets tonight, but that's sort of true of the Globes. I mean, the Globes have a history of that. I think the best animated feature.
What one?
It was the Laika film.
The Russian Dog?
No, not the Russian Dog. The what is it? Middle Ages? No, the prehistoric film. God,
I didn't know about it. No.
It didn't do well. See, I can't remember the name.
Oh, was it a major release of one of the, DreamWorks or whatever?
Well, Laika made Kubo and the Two Strings.
Okay.
And they're a really, really, really great company. And I think that I'm a huge fan of Laika Studios. And
okay.
Travis Knight, who's Phil Knight's son,
Nike guy.
Nike impresario of Nike, to see this film win, and it didn't do well in the Missing Link is the name of the film.
Okay.
And United Artists put it out, but it's Laika Studios, and it didn't do very well. But I think everything that Laika's put out has been pretty amazing. And it was against Frozen and against Toy Story. It was a pretty big upset, and I think it was a night of upsets. I mean, who would have thought 1917 would have taken Best Picture, and Best Director?
Yep.
And I think what's interesting about that is I always wonder, World War I is still a war, the war to end all wars, but it looms large in Europe still.
Absolutely.
And we, unless you're a fan of, say, Stanley Kubrick and like Paths of Glory or, things, Rules of the Game or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
We don't have our definitive World War I movies in America. I mean, I guess we do, but it's...
Yeah, but no, you're right. All Quiet on the Western Front, they did it back in the late 30s with Lou Ayres, and they did it on television with Ernest Borgnine and Richard Thomas, as I remember as a kid.
I do remember that very well.
I knew you would.
Well, and it's funny because 1917, you have Sam Mendes, obviously Academy Award-winning director, and you have Roger Deakins playing that whole one-shot card, even though it's not one shot, but can't wait to see it. But I think...
Yeah, me neither.
And it's based on a story from Sam Mendes's, I guess, grandfather or great-grandfather.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a personal story, a true story, based on a true story, and it was great to see, him win. And of course, Quentin Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, won for Best Musical or Comedy, which I always think it's so strange in the Golden Globes that they have them split into two categories. But it's sort of, I guess, a weather vane for which way the Oscar wins might blow.
Sure.
But it was an interesting show. I mean, Michelle Williams got up and talked about freedom of choice for women, and Joaquin Phoenix, boy, his speech was a little wacky.
Did he win Best Actor? Which
yeah, he won Best Actor for Joker.
Sure. That was interesting that the original screenplay for Joker won as well, because I could see Joaquin winning from an acting standpoint. I was surprised that the story won.
Right. Well, I mean, the best screenplay went to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So Joker, I don't know if Joker won screenplay unless it was... No, it didn't, because...
Oh, maybe... Because I could have sworn... Forgive me, did the woman that I saw, who I thought was accepting, no, Tarantino obviously wrote Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah, he accepted.
All right, I'm gonna look up, while we're talking, I'll look up Golden Globe winners, because it surprised me, and maybe no, it definitely wasn't an adapted screenplay. I don't know. Anyway, who cares? Moving on. Yeah, no, and Gervais seemed... I did watch his opening monologue before you and I were talking when I got home, so I caught that. Although it was bleeped, NBC bleeped it for you,
he got
too.
bleeped a lot, and so did Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, what did he say?
Well, again, I think he was a little scattered, as one might think he would be. He was all over the place, thanking people, but also talking about climate change and doing more for the environment, and he was everywhere. So, the Golden Globes, people get a little altered before they get this.
Oh, God. Classic. So, over the years. I mean, unbelievably classic hammered celebrities. I mean, I remember Elizabeth Taylor closing the show one night and being completely lost in terms of where she was and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And also, my favorite was Connery, and it was just him at the very end, and you could tell he was definitely a little hammered, and he had this, almost Boris Karloff tone in his voice where he's like, "Thank you very much, and good night." And it was just, chilling.
No, it was. I mean, there were some surprises. I thought Awkwafina winning Best Actress for Musical or Comedy for The Farewell was kind of fun. I think she was completely gobsmacked that she won, and Taron Egerton winning for Rocketman.
Yes,
for playing,
I saw that. Yes,
I mean, boy, did he win in great company. I thought that Renee Zellweger was fantastic in Judy, and she definitely deserved to win. But I do think Awkwafina was an upset. Taron Egerton was an upset, and I think no one was surprised that Brad Pitt won for Once Upon a Time in America or Hollywood. And what I really loved was that the Joker won Best Original Score, which was important because it was the first time a woman composer
I saw. Thank you, Rob.
Won a Golden Globe for Joker. That's exactly what you saw.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, she won. She was the first woman, and she won for Joker, and her name is Hildur. I couldn't even begin. Guanendotir?
Sure.
I think.
We'll go with that.
She,
that's fine.
Hildur. Goodman's daughter. I keep thinking about the name of the character from The Player. Greta Scacchi's character from The Player. Goodman's daughter. I mean, that was her.
Well done.
That's and Bjork. Those are the two Icelandic names that I know. But I could never. Although I've been obsessed with going to Iceland my whole life, and I actually had tickets. My ex-wife and I were going to go, and then we got divorced. So I actually had bought the tickets to go. I've never been to Iceland. I've always wanted to go. But, yeah, she also scored Chernobyl, which was incredible. And Chernobyl did win for Best Miniseries.
Yes, I saw that. That was amazing. Yeah.
Well, I thought Chernobyl was astonishing.
And I know, and I've seen you rave about it on the show, and I'm embarrassed to say I haven't watched it yet. That or Succession, and I'm thrilled for Succession because I hear nothing but great things, and especially from my writer buddies, whether they're TV writers or comic book people, they're all raving about how great Succession is, too. Well, I wanted to tell you because, go ahead, and then I'll tell you.
Well, I was going to say, it was great. Brian Cox won Best Actor for a series drama.
Yeah.
And, I'll tell you a funny Brian Cox story.
By all means.
So I was on the set of X-Men 2.
Okay.
And because I produced the behind-the-scenes documentaries.
Yes.
I was there the first day that Brian Cox was on set. And his first scene was with Patrick Stewart. And Patrick Stewart was incarcerated with his son, Legion.
That's right.
And so Brian Cox and Patrick Stewart were acting, and Brian Cox wasn't getting it. And he was frustrated. It just wasn't going well. So around noon, and I've been friends with Bryan Singer since film school. Brian just calls the day. He says, "Nope, we're going home." And on a huge movie like this, you don't call a day in the middle of the day.
Yeah, it's a few grand. I mean, and I'm being conservative. I mean,
you're thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. So I go. Brian says, "Come with me," and I go with him to his trailer, and he asks somebody to find a bottle of tequila for him. And I go, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Rob, just go home. There's gonna be nothing to shoot today." And I said, what? He goes, yeah, I'm going to take this bottle to Brian, and we're going to get a little drunk together. And we're going to talk about his character, and I think that he might be a little lost, not because he's a bad actor or anything, he's an incredible actor, but he was just thrown into this huge production. He just shows up here, and sometimes people don't quite know what they're expected to do.
Sure.
So I'm going to go and put him at ease. And I was like, wow. And then the next day when we started, they just continued on with that scene. And the guy, I've been a huge fan of Brian Cox all the way back to Manhunter.
Me too,
when he
man.
was the first Hannibal Lecter.
Absolutely. Yep. Michael Mann. Yeah.
I have to say that I'm watching Brian Cox and Patrick Stewart, and it was just like you couldn't take your eyes off him.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And it was riveting, and I learned sort of an important lesson about Hollywood. I mean, Brian Singer taught me a lot about Hollywood and how to play the game and the business of it all. But it was really interesting because he could have shot the rest of the day, and he wouldn't have had anything that he liked. And rather than just waste the time, he was either able to go into the edit bay and do there's always work to be done, even when you're not shooting on a feature film. But the next day, they got the scene quickly, and it was great.
It was
great. And it was really, that was my one experience where I actually got to sit on a set and watch Brian Cox act. And the guy is just, I don't think I've ever seen Brian Cox ever give a bad performance.
I'm with you.
He's amazing. The guy's amazing.
Well, and for me, where he went to another level that I didn't expect was in all things Super Troopers. And he's great. And, there's a really broad comedy, and the last thing I expected Brian Cox to be in, given the rest of his work, and he was fantastic. And I was like, okay. And again, like you said, since Manhunter, and I always, when people talk about Hannibal Lecter, I'm like, if you haven't, and then certainly this is more in the pre-DVD years, but it was like, if you haven't seen Manhunter, man, you really got to see Brian Cox, because I love Hopkins, and Hopkins is great, but so much more over the top to Cox's much more chilling and matter-of-fact Hannibal Lecter.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because it's really interesting seeing, we now have multiple actors. You have Brian Cox, you have the young Hannibal from Hannibal Rising.
Yes.
You have Anthony Hopkins, and then you have Mads Mikkelsen.
Yep.
And they're all very sort of different incarnations of that same character.
Agreed.
And I'm a huge fan of Brian Fuller's Hannibal.
Yes.
I think Hannibal is one of the great horror television shows ever made. It's one of the great genre shows ever made. And it also shows how you can reinvent well-trodden ground and make it new and fresh. We had seen Silence of the Lambs, you'd seen Red Dragon, and Manhunter had been made twice.
Yep.
And then we'd seen Ridley Scott's Hannibal, and we saw Hannibal Rising. And while Fuller didn't have the rights to Silence of the Lambs, the novel, he created this heady melange of those other three books, and we had the movies, and he really turned it into something that we'd never seen before. And Hannibal is one of the most incredibly well-made and well-produced television shows ever, and it was on NBC.
I know. Isn't that amazing? That and The Good Place. It's anytime, and there's very few examples these days of a network show really being exceptional. And it's, I would agree in both cases. I'd put The Good Place right there with Hannibal as well in terms of, wow, I did not expect to see this on network television. Pretty cool.
So, yeah. I have to say that I'm really looking forward to Manifest returning tomorrow night. Manifest, a show that I just love to hate watch.
I know nothing about this show. Tell me.
Manifest it's what I call an impossible premise show. It's a show where somebody pitched the premise, and the premise sounded really cool in the room. And here's the premise. A plane is returning back from the Caribbean.
Right.
And it lands 5 years after it left. So everybody has to deal with their friends and their family and their loved ones. If you were married, maybe your husband or wife thought you died on this plane and moved on. But, not to be outdone, everybody on the plane starts hearing voices that tell them to do things to rescue other people that they don't know from horrible things going on in their lives. So it's like Touched by an Angel meets Lost.
Yeah.
Meets all this other
I was going to say Lost meets Quantum Leap, but all right. You're right.
Yeah,
Touched by an Angel.
It's so but this singular premise, this impossible premise, it doesn't matter what you do. You can never get away from the fact that this premise doesn't work. And they're going to fall all over themselves. I can't believe it made it to season 2. The cast is good. I like the cast.
Okay.
But the show is there's X-Files thrown in, and then because they have nowhere to go with a premise like that. It's either like government experimentation, but then you get into alternate universes or realities and time warps, and then of course there literally are. They are the people that went through this are getting signals from beyond telling them that they have to go help people. Well, that presupposes that there's an intelligence behind all of this. And how do they know? Like, are they charting everybody's lives? And why do they only pick these people to be helped? I mean, it doesn't. The premise doesn't make. You can't. Even if you're going to buy into some fantasy construct, there is no way the show is going to work. And the last episode of the first season has some supernatural. This guy vomits out or expels gallons of water or something from his insides that come completely out of left field, that has nothing to do with what we've seen before. But the writers don't know that, and they're like, "Come on, man, Lost worked." Lost, at no point in Lost did anybody go, "Dude," not one character said to another character, "We're back in the 70s. Not only does this island make crippled people walk, but we time travel. That's amazing." No, people just accept it. And I cannot stand that kind of storytelling because, anybody who loves science fiction, fantasy, and horror loves it because someone, whether it was an author or a filmmaker, made you believe.
Right.
J.R.R. Tolkien made you believe in Middle-earth.
Yep.
And I cannot stand these J.J. Abrams Bad Robot mystery box shows where they really don't know what's going on. And Manifest, I hate.
Is it a JJ show?
No.
Okay, go on.
No, it was somebody worse. It was somebody copying JJ shows.
Oh, sure. That show was a split. I can't even remember the name of it. Fast Forward, right?
Oh my God!
Remember that one?
Yeah, and you look at all these things and you're like, the impossible premise. It's like the Impossible Burger is better, even though it's not real meat. The impossible premise. It's like it sounds good on paper, but ultimately you don't know what's really going on, and nor is there any, even in a construct, even in a sci-fi fantasy construct where people are willing to believe, you've bitten off more than you can chew. You can never explain it, and even if you do explain it, your explanation is so weird and convoluted that it's like, I don't want to know. Don't tell me anymore.
I used to talk to, I haven't talked to him in a while, Jason Alexander, who was one of the writers on Alias. And he confessed to me, I'm like, the whole mythology behind Alias and stuff. He goes, "Oh, we were making it up as we went along."
Right, and you know what's funny about Alias?
And I love Alias.
The first season and a half of Alias was incredible.
Agreed.
And there was one episode, it was the Super Bowl episode.
Yes.
Where they take down SD6.
Right, the organization, yes.
Yeah, that was the end of the show.
You're so funny.
And the villain, one of the great villains in television,
Arvin Sloan.
Yeah, Sloan. They had no idea where to go after that. They're just like, I guess we have to take him down. Like, nope. And after that, then they get the mother and the prophecies. And all like, what the fuck is this? And it was such, and I felt that way about Lost. They didn't, and Lost just kept piling on. The last season of Lost was one of the greatest audience betrayals of all.
Hilarious.
And I can't stand the fact that J.J. Abrams and his mystery box cronies have been in charge of Star Trek for 11 years now.
Well, I'm with
the
you
hostage
there,
crisis has gone on for 11 years.
Free the Enterprise.
I mean, it's just it's unbelievable to me. The two Star Trek Discovery. I've said this before. It is the worst produced science fiction show of all time, and they spend the most money.
Yeah.
And it's unconscionable what has gone on with that show.
I'm totally with you, as you know, and it gives me the opportunity, and I'm sure we could talk about the anticipation or concern about Star Trek Picard. But I know you and I have exchanged messages about the short treks this year. Holy fuck.
God.
Holy fuck. And let's start with every one of them, and even these last two animated ones. Have you seen those as well now?
Oh, my God.
They sucked.
Yeah.
They all sucked.
Well, look, I can't. It's so. You know what I can't stand about it? It's like we were talking before the show started about the idea of, in this day and age, that no one has any sense of history and no one actually does any research.
Yes.
But in one of the animated Short Treks episodes, they take us on a merry jaunt through the history of the Enterprise. And we see all of these historical moments. And this is what kills me. They redo the scene in Star Trek 3 where the Enterprise explodes.
Yes.
And except they got the Enterprise wrong. It's showing us this, and it shows us the Enterprise A, not the Enterprise 1701. The Enterprise in Star Trek 3 was the Enterprise refit from Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Right, yes.
And then in Star Trek 3, it's still that same refit, and it explodes. And it burns up over the Genesis planet.
Yep.
The Enterprise A does not exist until the very end of the next movie, Star Trek The Voyage Home.
Right.
So people are like, oh, Rob, why does that matter? I'm like, because they're showing you a starship explode that never exploded.
So
is that telling you this is the history of Star Trek? And I'm like, no, it's not. What?
Did it... wait, I just want to ask... because this is the level of Master Trek expert that you are. Was it by the design of the ship, or did it say 1701A?
No, the Enterprise says 1701A.
Okay.
On the top of the saucer section. As a matter of fact, that's a big reveal.
Oh, hell yes. At the end of 4.
Star Trek 4, when they don't even know, they're right. Getting a ship, they're taking a shuttle in the middle of space dock.
My money is on Excelsior. Go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when they actually show the Enterprise, they show the dish. It's the first time they ever created the conceit that the next ship in that class will be called, or the next name of the next Enterprise would be A, and then B, yep. And C and D.
Yep.
That was the first time we saw that.
That's right.
And when I'm watching this, I'm like,
you're right, man.
Why would you? It just shows you people aren't doing your jobs. Yeah. You're telling a story about Star Trek history, but did you actually bother to watch? I mean, there's clearly a shot in Star Trek 3 where the saucer section, the primary hull, is disintegrating.
Yeah.
And they show you the NCC 1701 on the hull come apart.
Yes.
And I'm like, it's that kind of thing where clearly they're like, we can't be bothered. You can't show me scenes, even if it's animated, from the history of the Enterprise and then get the actual ship wrong. The Enterprise A, it was never in the scene that you're showing me. It never blew up the way you're showing me. And yet you're telling me I'm supposed to watch this and go, oh, that's right. I mean, if I was a teacher grading their Star Trek, you get an F. You didn't do your homework. You didn't do the reading. You're trying to bullshit the teacher. That's how I feel when I watch Star Trek Discovery.
And Rob, you're beyond being an avid watcher, I know. And it was so great to discover because I used to go to the Vegas to cover boxing matches, and in the 90s in particular, and used to go all the time to the Vegas Hilton and made a special trip to do the Star Trek experience every time I was in town. So I got to watch your work. You put together the video montages before you get to the actual ride. It's like a Star Trek museum of, I'm assuming, real props and replicas and costumes and all these video monitors of these great battle scenes or great character scenes, and you put all that shit together as far as the video stuff.
I did. It was, again, it's something, it's so funny. I mean, I might not have achieved the great commercial success of some of my peers, but when I shuffle off this mortal coil, I will think about William Shatner's Kirk when he was dying at the end of Generations, and he says, "It's been fun." You know, I had fun. Like, I literally got paid for a year and a half to about the first 4 months, every single day I watched Star Trek episodes, and I had to digitize them into the computer, into the Avid, because we had to edit.
Sure.
And so I had to put them all in before we could edit. So I would watch 8 to 10 Star Trek episodes a day for about 4.5 months. And it was up through like 97. So we'd had the first 2 years, up through the first 2 years of Voyager.
Awesome.
And it was amazing. And then I got to I cut a bunch of videos. There were 3 giant videos that played as you walked into the attraction. And then as you walked through the museum, before the little, like it was a museum line, you go through the line up to the ride, but it was like a Star Trek museum, and there was a Romulan video and a Borg video and a Klingon video and the history, and I got to cut all of that.
That's amazing.
And it was amazing, and I recently uncovered, there are low resolution videos of the 3 videos that played above the main attraction, and those are gone. And what was really interesting was they were cut very quickly. And what they did after the experience opened, because of SAG rules and things like that, they had to put the name of each episode on every clip.
Wow.
So it was terrible. It was terrible.
Yeah.
Because they had to say, oh, this is for promotional purposes. Because they didn't, you know, if we put those on, then do we have to pay actors?
Sure.
Because we're reusing things. And I'm like, look, you could have, did you really have to wreck? I wouldn't have cut the videos the way I cut them if I knew there was going to be text. Because when you're intercutting, sometimes shots would last half a second or a second or something. To put any kind of text on them ruins the whole thing.
Sure.
Because you're trying to create a mood. And they did that. They did that in the experience. And, of course, what was interesting was from 2012 to 2011 and to 2014, I spent 3 years creating all of the documentaries that are on the Blu-rays of Star Trek: The Next Generation. So we did many, 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 many hours of documentaries, and I got to sit down with everybody who worked on Next Generation, from Rick Berman, the executive producer, on down to all the cast. I even hosted, I think I've told you before, I hosted a roundtable conversation that is on the season 2 disc of me interviewing the entire principal cast of Next Gen, which is a highlight of my life.
And I've watched it, and it's a very good, you did a great job, man. It was a great interview. Absolutely, man. That's a lot of cattle to rustle there, man.
Yeah, I mean, I just moved out of the way.
But that is the best thing. That is the best thing that an interviewer can do, as you well know. So that's excellent. No, and I never saw when it became the Voyager Borg ride.
You know, to be honest, neither did I.
Oh, interesting.
I went to the. It's funny because you know what? Interestingly enough, yesterday was the 22nd anniversary of the attraction opening.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately it's not there anymore. But it was an amazing. It really was amazing.
The best.
The Star Trek experience was amazing. It was really well done, and everybody I worked with was really amazing. And I had a terrific time. That was a great job. But I never went on the Borg 3D experience. That came in a number of years later.
Yes,
it wasn't there when we originally opened, and I think they had to keep it fresh.
Sure.
And it's too bad they couldn't. I mean, look, unfortunately, unlike the Marvel Cinematic Universe with somebody like Kevin Feige as the man with the plan, and he really does have a plan, there's nobody ever who's worked at Paramount after the Berman era of Star Trek ended in 2005. There's never been a Star Trek figurehead, somebody you could go to who had the experience both of producing movies and television and really understood Star Trek. It's all been bifurcated and because everybody will tell you, do you like Star Trek? Oh, I love Star Trek. And the way the television world works is a lot of TV writers don't care what shows they're working on. You know, you get a job, you're a TV writer, you kind of are in that ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And there's unfortunately, I think, the problem with Star Trek is it feels like no one's ever read a science fiction novel. And science fiction being a very literary based, you're either using classical literature, it's allegorical, or you're using cutting edge science fiction to inform what you're writing.
Yep.
And I just the writers that have written for Discovery have been, I mean, the writing has been abysmal.
Dude, even people that you'd think you could trust, like Michael Chabon, who, you know, Cavalier and Clay and Wonder Boys and so many great books and so many great short stories. And even I was like telling you, either live chat on your YouTube or the few times that we talk here, I'm like, yeah, but it's Michael Chabon. It's going to be okay. And then literally the worst short track is the Michael Chabon one this year, the Tribble one with H. John Benjamin. And it's just insipid. It's insipid. It doesn't make sense from a Tribble history standpoint. It doesn't make sense from a story standpoint. And it's just, God, it was so inane.
Well, how about the fact that human life, they joke about the death of a human being? I mean, they set up, this is the second time in Discovery's history they have set up a character, a Starfleet character, who is somebody who's so insufferable that it's okay that he dies.
Are you talking about the science officer from the Enterprise that gets whacked at the beginning of season 2?
That character, and then the character on the short trek with the Tribbles.
Right. Yeah, H. John Benjamin's character. Yeah,
who is just shown as being a bad person. The captain's like, well, I guess you're I mean, the fact that it's become so glib and so... Yeah. I'm like, this is so antithetical to everything that Star Trek is.
Yes.
And you know, I think there is a fundamental lack of respect nowadays. We've become so, we're all too cool for school. We all know so much. We're all just like, oh, let me. I feel like everybody is, even though no one smokes tobacco anymore, we're all holding those long plastic cigarette tubes with a cigarette at the end. Listen, let me just tell you, darling. Let me tell you.
Tallulah Bankhead, exactly.
Yeah, except that it's everybody. You know, it's everybody as they're not looking at you as they talk to you. They're looking at their Instagram feed as they're smoking, and let me just, it was so just not very interesting, you know. It drives me crazy. And when I saw that episode, I'm like, whoever greenlit this horrible, awful, and to put that much awfulness in 15 minutes. Yeah. I mean, that is true talent.
I've been actually clocking the running times of these things, and even though they claim they're 15, it's like, actually that's about 12 minutes, or actually that's only about 8 minutes, or whatever.
Wow,
but
okay.
But even worse.
I've never, it's just the most...
The worst.
The worst. And
yeah.
Look, I am really hoping that this Picard series is good. It feels like a Star Trek novel that I would have liked.
Agreed.
You know, with all the Borg stuff and all that. But again, it's like, really, of all the things you could have done, I mean, with Picard, I read this book, and I talk about it on my own YouTube show on Robservations. I read a book by one of my favorite writers. His name's Dan Simmons, and the book is called Phases of Gravity. And the main character is a fictional astronaut, but he landed on the moon. But that was decades ago. But it was the most significant thing he ever did in his life. And now he's dealing with, well, the rest of his life, and his son he's estranged from. And the specter, the thing that he wonders, or that sort of lords over his life, is the idea that the most significant thing he'll ever have done in his life is decades behind him. So once that's happened, how do you find meaning in the rest of your life? Sure. Like, how do you go on? So I think, you know, if you're a guy like Jean-Luc Picard, who is interested in archaeology, was interested in a lot of other things, once you've saved the universe, once you've literally been transformed into a Borg, couldn't there have been, and while I say this, I understand Star Trek it's always been an action-adventure show seen through the prism, you know, an action-adventure science fiction show seen through the prism of our life today.
Sure.
And we want it to be exciting, and you want an audience to be interested. So I don't think you have to make some contemplative Tarkovsky-esque meditation or Bergman-esque meditation on the end of someone's life. I mean, I don't think that's what although that could make a good episode, but for a new series. But when you're dealing with Picard, it just seems like, oh, we have another girl in trouble, that might be a Borg or might be Picard's daughter, whatever the hell it is. And I'm looking at all this stuff, and I'm like, while it's great to see Patrick Stewart come back, I feel that we're going to get the most obvious, like the things we see. Oh, Family, the episode where Picard goes back to his family vineyard in Le Bar, France, and fights with his brother. It's like that was one episode out of 178 of The Next Generation. One episode. And, of course, they make a big deal about it. Because, it's fan service, and wow, that's the one place. I'm like, if you gave a cursory look at 10 Picard episodes of Next Generation out of the 178 of TNG, you would pick, of course, let's go back to his family vineyard where he's like hanging out. Because what they're doing is, as they've done with all Star Trek now, is they've taken a cliched story about old age and they've plugged it into the character. And by the way, I say this having not seen the show.
I understand.
I hope it's better. But it's like a guy like Jean-Luc Picard's going to be hanging out at his family vineyard like, I don't know, man, I feel terrible. Something bad happened. The guy was turned into a Borg. He led the Borg cube against the Federation fleet and wiped out thousands of soldiers at the Battle of Wolf 359.
That's right.
Okay, horribly traumatic. There is nothing in his life. I don't care if something bad went awry when he was trying to evacuate some planet. You cannot tell me that he already survived the most horrible thing that's ever going to happen to him. He's not going to be hanging out, no matter what happened to him, in his vineyard in France that we all knew that he never belonged at in the first place. The whole point of that episode was to tell us that, man, that was not a place he wanted to be. He goes back there, he finds this is not a place I want to be, and he gets the fuck out. And yet they make all of this the most easily digestible, easy to understand if you're a television writer. It's like, oh, let's go back to his home. I saw that one episode, Family. That was good.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry, Rob. Please.
No, I'm just like, it's to me, I'm like, this is not interesting. This is Star Trek 101. This is Star Trek that is being written by people that really don't have anything to offer other than the easy way out.
Agreed. There's a possibility, and we'll see, obviously.
I want it to be good, though, John.
Oh, no, and seriously, man, A, I believe you, and B, I know you do, because you've said as much on your show as well. And even the last time I talked, I'm sure we both said it as well. But all that said, I'll give him a slight pass, given where Picard was in All Good Things, and his Irumodic syndrome, which that might be part of the... and in fact, might explain, if people have obviously seen the trailers, the data visions, and hey, maybe he lost data on this evacuation thing, or whatever explanation. I haven't been reading the Countdown comic book. I loved what you said, I think it was today, about transmedia back in the day, when you were discussing the Animatrix, which is truly one of my favorite transmedia products that ever came out.
Probably the best one that ever came out.
I would agree with you on that, absolutely. And yeah, nothing frustrates me more, and it just happened recently in the Star Wars sequels, that, if you want an explanation of who Laura Dern's character is, read the book. And it's like, no, fuck you. I'm watching the movie. Let me understand this in this case. And again, so I have no idea why Picard is back at the vineyard. Obviously some big trauma. I agree with you that I can't see what would be bigger than Wolf 359. And in fact, that moment in Family, when they're in the vineyard and covered in mud, and he breaks down in front of his brother. God, one of the best moments in Star Trek. I don't know if it made the Inglorious Treksperts list.
No, it didn't, but it should have.
Because man, it's truly like the most human moment of Jean-Luc Picard that we get to actually see, and it's But no, man, I hear you, and I'm nervous about Star Trek Picard and the other subsequent shows, and I don't know. And I guess the third season of Discovery, as I shrug, always hoping for the best, but we'll see. We'll know in a couple weeks.
It's really interesting. The second half of the second season of Discovery was all about Section 31 and this AI called Control. And of course, David Mack, one of my favorite Star Trek novelists, and by the way, that is not, I say that with no irony when I say my favorite Star Trek novelist.
I'm with you, man. I read
David Mack has written some truly great Star Trek novels. And he wrote a Section 31 novel a couple of years ago, predating the show, called Control.
Yes, sir.
He was never credited.
No.
And I know he's consulting on one of the animated shows,
Yeah,
but this is just you look at this stuff and you're like, are you kidding me? And first of all, we got the dumbest, most lunk-headed idea of what an AI is.
Oh, God, yes.
And
Makes no
I'm
sense.
just like, my God, we live in a world where Her exists, the movie Her,
Yes.
where you see an
Fucking
operating
goodness.
system, they gain sentience, and they don't want to destroy humanity. They just go off into the universe to do what they're going to do. And this idea that, well, gosh, ever since Skynet came alive in 1984, or Colossus in 1970,
Classic.
we have to do the most rudimentary, stupid, overdone, ridiculously dumbed down version of what an AI was going to do in that, and so not Star Trek.
Yep. No, you're right, man. I wish Asimov were alive. He would have shaken his fist at him, too.
Oh, my God. And you look at this and you're like, do you read any speculative fiction? I mean, here, should I send you all my back episodes or issues of Omni? Or maybe pick up
Bob Guccione's amazing science magazine, Omni. I love that magazine.
Yeah, published by Bob Guccione, of all people.
Yes. He's through the commercials.
Yeah.
The latest issue of Omni. That great voice.
Absolutely, and I'm like, why? This is what I can't stand. I think I don't. Not that I'm some oracle of Delphi, but like you, I grew up with all of this material as a child that whose life was changed early on by Star Trek and the Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits.
Yep.
And then when I was 10, then Star Wars came out, and in the wake of Star Wars, we got, whether it was Romero's Dawn of the Dead or whether it was Alien or Superman the movie, the years after Star Wars came out, we got a lot of really amazing cinema, science fiction, fantasy, horror cinema.
Yes.
And in the wake of that, the comic book explosion and revolution of the 80s.
Yep.
All of the great fantasy novels, Stephen King becoming a force of nature, and then
Clive Barker.
we got Clive Barker and the Books of Blood. We got so much stuff. And what I can't stand is, why is it that I know more about these things than the people actually creating them? And I feel like if they're getting the fat checks from writing this stuff, why isn't it better?
Yeah.
You should know. I feel like and that's not to say there's some incredible television. I mean,
it's just that Star Trek doesn't have a seat at the table, apparently, when it comes to the incredible writing. Yeah.
I mean, you look at The Expanse, which is based on a series of books.
Yep.
You look at The Boys, based on a comic book. I mean, talk about subversive, and though I'm loath to admit this, I mean, Lindelof's Watchmen is half of a great show and half of...
I want to get into that with you, man. All right, fine, because yes, I've watched it all as well. So,
but I mean, it's like, why? I'm an easy lay when it comes to this thing. I want to love it all. I go into it wanting to love it all.
Me too, man.
And it's like you finally hook up with the girl of your dreams, and you find out she's either has bad breath, or she's just not good in bed, or not wanting to be there, or boring, or disinterested, or whatever, and all of your dreams are dashed, and you wonder, how can that be? How did this come to pass? Well, it's because she was always beautiful, and she never developed her own sense of self, and unfortunately, she has nothing to bring to the party. But that's always unfortunate when that happens. But I feel like that's what I'm getting. Like, these people, they've got these jobs, they've got these connections, but they never have done the work to have the background to know what they should be doing or what it's really frustrating. They're
playing at Star Trek. I mean, really, and those shorts, the animated short that you mentioned is a classic example of that. They're playing at it, and the same with the Tribble episode. And then Michael Chabon infuriated me further when, as we discussed, I think, at a live chat on your YouTube thing, the article that he wrote for the New Yorker or whatever, which is really sad about his father, and it really breaks my heart, but that he is obsessed by the mystery of Mr. Spock's smile in the cage and the menagerie. And it's, it's, again, as we've discussed and as you said on your own show, it's like, no, that was just the pilot when Number One and Mr. Spock were two different characters, and then as the series progressed, Roddenberry just kind of infused, or other people like D.C. Fontana, infused more of the stoic character of Number One into Mr. Spock, and he became the classic Spock. And it's like, yeah, it's just early in the progress. That's all. They didn't quite know what the show was when they made Where No Man Has Gone, or The Cage, rather.
Well, so, yeah, and here's...
Or Where No Man's Gone before. Go on.
Yes, and here's something else. There is another canonical moment from the original Star Trek that was really, really important, where Spock smiled broadly, and that was at the end of the second season opener, Amok Time.
Yes.
When Kirk walks out, Spock thinks he's killed his captain, a little subterfuge by Dr. McCoy, and when Spock sees that Kirk is alive, he says, "Jim," and grabs him, and all of his Vulcan teaching falls away, and he smiles. And what I thought was really unfortunate about what Chabon did with that was that the thing is, it's not that Vulcans don't have emotions, because they do.
Of course they do.
But their teachings are such where they have the utmost control of their emotions. And they completely understand. I mean, Mr. Spock clearly has a sense of humor. He understands it all because he's studied it. He's learned humor the way an archaeologist learns about a culture. Now, he's made jokes throughout the whole series, not just in funny episodes, but he does show that he understands humor. Spock is a very well-rounded, nuanced character. And I feel that ever since 2009, no one has understood Spock.
Completely agree.
They are showing him to be one-dimensional. They want him to be easy. The conversation he was having with Number One and all that,
in the elevator and the turbo shaft.
It was just terrible.
Absolutely, it was.
The amusement park turbo lift, where apparently,
what the hell?
I mean, I look at this stuff and I'm like, are you people out of your minds when they're showing the turbo shaft plunging through a bunch of empty space on rails like it's a roller coaster,
or a Swiss chalet, tram between mountains or whatever? Yeah, it makes no sense whatsoever, as you point out. Yeah, man, spaceships have limited space.
I'm like, who? And then you even see things floating around outside, like there's maintenance things. Like, what are you doing? Like, what the hell, man? And when I watch stuff like this, I'm like, who the fuck put these people in charge? I mean, what's interesting to me, too, is you have, before 2009, you had 40 years of probably the most well-documented fictional universe of all time, with maybe the exception of perhaps Middle-earth. But in terms of finding your tech manuals,
hundreds of novels,
and it's like, I understand that might be intimidating, but why make yourself look wantonly stupid when you show a turbo lift on these curvy rails going, really? Is that what you is that what you got out of Star Trek? I mean, I learned that that's not true in 1975 when I was 8 and I was given the Franz Joseph blueprints of the Enterprise. And I was freaking 8 years old. And by the way, I still have the exact same blueprints package. It's mint condition that I had when I was 8. And you know what? I would have been happy to take it over. I would have walked it over and said, here's how the inside of a starship is supposed to look. And those blueprints aren't even canonical, and they're far more accurate and relevant. Yeah. I mean, you've seen cutaways of the Enterprise the motion picture Enterprise, that beautiful David Kimball painting that I had on my wall for years. I'm like, and what the fuck are these people doing? And why are they getting paid? Why is their TV show the most expensive TV show ever made? I mean, it's just unbelievable. They should the lot of them, they're bad at their jobs. And this is the only show I rail about, but they really are. And they're people that think they're not, and that's what makes it even worse.
Well, yeah, because you got this new generation of fans, and they don't know better. I mean, you and I discussed Joker in the same way, in terms of, if you don't know Taxi Driver, if you don't know King of Comedy, you think, wow, this is such an original movie.
Right.
And it's like I told you, and I this is my mantra ever since, including tonight when they were watching the SAG Awards, or not the Golden Globes. And I'm like, it's like a great cover band that does a great version of a song. The new generation never heard the original, and they're like blown away by the cover. And it's like, all right, well, I get it. And like you said, they're not interested in the past.
Right.
So,
and look, I don't think people necessarily. I've often said on my show that I think pop culture has a shelf life or a half-life of 20 years.
Agreed. I really, when you said that, man, I'm like, yes. And seriously, I never really thought about it that way. Continue.
And after 20 years, every generation wants something that's uniquely theirs. They don't want to be told that, it was much better in the olden days. But what's really interesting is up until recently, we always got new and interesting pop culture, and I feel like we're in a weird rut where, because of things have become much more expensive to produce.
Yes.
So they have to mitigate risk by going back and making things that are remakes of something else. I mean, Party of Five is being remade, but the whole time, the parents were deported because they're from either Central America or Mexico, so the family is left alone to fend for itself. Now, I understand that. I think that's actually, if you're going to remake Party of Five, that's probably a pretty good premise. But you're still remaking Party of Five.
Right.
and we have such really interesting, vibrant, unique television. I mean, you look at genre stuff of the last year, Umbrella Academy, which is, I never thought I would see the Umbrella Academy and The Boys. Two great examples of comic book adaptations. Amazing work.
Agreed. I'm psyched for Mark Miller's stuff coming up. I just talked to him in the last month, and they're shooting Jupiter's Legacy and American Jesus right now. Both of those. I mean,
Jupiter's Legacy. I loved that comic.
Oh God, yeah.
I loved it, and I again. Now we have a world. It's so funny because 10 years ago, we didn't have a world where the Gen Pop could understand this stuff.
Sure.
We'd have to explain it to people. And now we do. And now the Jupiter's Legacy storyline, everybody will get it from the get-go.
100%.
You don't have to go in there and explain what all of it is because people will get it.
No, I agree with you. No.
I think that's amazing that we live now in this time. And it's so funny to me. I had a book that I've been contemplating. This pisses me off. I really wanted to I directed one movie 20 years ago.
Yes,
and I've been producing movies and things, but I want to get obviously back into directing. And what I really wanted to do, I've been looking for what could I make a limited budget, fairly contained science fiction story. And I read Clifford Simak's 1963 Hugo Award-winning novel Way Station. And look, my own fault. I've been talking to everybody about it for the last 3 or 4 years, and I didn't buy the rights or anything. And then suddenly I read, 3 or 4 months ago, that Matt Reeves, who's directing the new Batman for Warner Brothers, Matt Reeves, who made the Planet of the Apes movies, the recent ones, his company bought it and they're making it. They're making Way Station. And what's funny is somebody even said, well, we're going to make this. It's going to be an epic, sweeping tale. And I'm like, the whole point of this story is it's not an epic, sweeping tale. The fate of the Earth is literally going to be decided by one man in a cabin. And that's what makes the story really interesting. And when I was reading this, I'm like, what fucking book did you read, man? And I understand what you're doing. I get it. But Way Station is such an incredible. It would have made a great Twilight Zone, especially. You know what it is? It's a feature-length the best Outer Limits episode you could ever watch.
Now, funny you should mention that because my thoughts go to the Will Smith I, Robot, in which, just like you described, was a great original Outer Limits, was even a decent 90s Outer Limits that Leonard Nimoy played a different role. He was in both versions. Adam Nimoy, of course, as you know, directed the second one.
Yep.
And the I, Robot that Will Smith made was a complete embarrassment. And I'm even on the Prophets of Science Fiction television show, and I'm embarrassed to say they had clips from iRobot and the Asimov episode, and I'm like, oh man, you guys blew it. Because iRobot is an excellent, that particular story in iRobot, the short story collection, is a great courtroom drama and a real interesting intellectual question of, sentience, much like Measure of a Man in Next Generation with Data. and kind of maybe the grandfather to that story in some ways. But, yeah, I mean, it's this great thing. And again, like you said, they made this big, epic, noisy, stupid, CGI-filled shitfest in the iRobot of Will Smith that had very little to do with the original story. Yeah.
Well, the one thing though, I think it's not all bad, because what I do think is happening is that now audiences they're very savvy about their science fiction and horror and fantasy tropes.
Okay.
So they get it. So when you have a show like The Boys come on, which I thought was actually even better than the comic, to be honest.
I agree.
And
I completely agree.
I love
the comic. Yeah. Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson. Very good. Excellent comic.
I mean, the comic really, it wallowed, as Ennis did, wallows in degradation and blood and gore, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But the TV show, because we've had the MCU, and because we've had the DC movies, the general population is now very familiar with comic book tropes. And so The Boys doesn't have to spend all of this time building a world with superheroes in it, because we already know. And I think if we hadn't had the last 12 years now of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DC Universe and all of the CW shows, everybody knows everything they need to know about superheroes now. So there's now a shorthand that comic book readers have always had, but now the general population has that shorthand too, so you can make a comic book show and everybody gets it.
Agreed.
You don't have to say, and that was something that didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago, and that's why you can make Umbrella Academy, and that's why you can make The Boys, because the audience has been educated to these things, and that's why it's so disappointing to see sort of a Star Trek which wallows in tropes that were old 30 years ago.
Agreed.
And
I agree. I'm sorry. I just knocked something over, but everything's fine. I was going to say real fast regarding The Boys. The other thing is the extra layer of it not only being a parody of the MCU in terms of the superhero sense, but also the marketing of the MCU in real life. And right. I just love that combination. And it was a great kind of snide, good satire in terms of just the marketing of pop culture today and everything alongside the real superhero stuff that's going on.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And I
didn't mean to derail you. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I agree. And we have the we might lament about those young whippersnappers, but the fact is the audience has been educated as science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and we have been getting some terrific. I mean, who would have thought the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance would have been as great as it is? I mean,
agreed.
You could actually say that, well, a puppet show could have been spoken in the same sentence as Game of Thrones. Or now we've got Witcher, which is hit and miss, but
haven't seen Witcher yet, but okay.
There's amazing stuff going on, and
absolutely,
so much good material. I mean, Stephen King. There's an adaptation of his book, The Outsider, that I guess Jason Bateman directed, that's starting on HBO, that looks fantastic. The book, I liked half of it, and then the reveal, it didn't really work, but the supernatural twist in it didn't work, but it looks like the show figured it out. And we're getting so much great stuff. And even as much as I both loved and hated The Watchmen.
Let's get into it. Yes.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I still have to admire what they went for.
Great ambition. I liked it better, I think, than you did, but go on.
Well, so, first of all, the fact that somebody greenlit a show, a very expensive, very prestigious show, HBO greenlit a show that was a sequel to a comic book story that was 35 or 34 years old now. Right. 34 years old is insane.
And well, one caveat. It is, as you know, Time listed it, when Time magazine still mattered, among the 100 greatest novels of the century.
Right.
Not graphic novels, novels.
Right.
And despite the misfires of the 2009 movie, I think the nerd audience has been still very much on the side of the comic book. And I don't know. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I agree, and especially given that it is still a sequel of a comic book. Again, we've had all these advances in understanding the comic book genre from a general audience perspective that did make it easier to make that. But by all means,
absolutely. But it got made, and I was blown away. And by the way, it was very handsomely made, beautifully produced, very well directed. But again, I think as you get to the end of it, it revealed the Emperor has no clothes. And again, Lindelof, who I put in the same Bad Robot mystery box storytelling. It was interesting because he might say to you, "Well, no, we emulated the storytelling of the original Watchmen." And I'm like, superficially, you might have. But what I thought was really interesting, I saw an interview with Damon Lindelof, and he was talking about meeting with other TV writers.
Okay.
And when they get together, they all try, in his words, to out-woke one another.
Yikes.
And when I saw that, I'm like, oh, I get it now. Because what Lindelof then said was he was now equating for those of you who might not have read the Watchmen comic book, a lot of the Watchmen is steeped in the politics and of the time. And we were still mired in the Cold War and mutually assured destruction, and the world, the idea of nuclear apocalypse was very real. Duck and cover.
1985.
1985, all that was true. And here's something that I also thought was part of the reason the movie didn't work as well as it should have. The idea that Richard Nixon is serving his fourth term as president in the comic made sense because it came out in 1985, and Watergate and Vietnam and Richard Nixon and the 60s and the 70s were all part of the cultural zeitgeist even still.
Yep.
And that made sense if you were living in 1985 and 86 when the comic came out.
Yeah.
So
you're right, 86, by the way. Go on.
Yeah, so what the comic took place in 85, but it was coming out in 86, I think.
That's right. Yeah, there you go. Attaboy.
And so this idea that you're talking about the apocalypse, nuclear Armageddon, and the whole idea of the clock and the doomsday clock being set close to midnight permeated. That iconography was literally on every issue of the comic. You turned over the comic, and there was the clock, and the blood was flowing deeper and deeper and deeper toward the clock. I mean, and Alan Moore is an incredibly well-educated man. He's drawing on so many different things. So in his idea to out-woke his other TV writers, Lindelof comes up with the premise that racism is the biggest threat facing the world. He's trying to make that. And he said as much in interviews. And what I thought was immediately, warning bells were going off in my mind, because American racism and our history of slavery is different than what goes on in the rest of the world. The rest of the world has different experiences. I mean, people hate each other all over the planet. You know, the rape of Nanking, what the Japanese did to the Chinese has not been forgotten. You know, Asian cultures hate one another. And so when I saw Lindelof leaning heavily into America's racist past and making white supremacists the primary villain in the story, I'm like, okay, so has Lindelof ever traveled around the world? Does he have a passport? Or is he just going to make this story about America? Because, and I understand the idea of masked heroes and all that was an American phenomenon, and I liked what he did, bringing up what happened in Tulsa, the Black Wall Street Massacre.
Yes.
All of that was really great, and I liked how he incorporated all of that in the story. All of that was window dressing when you get to the end of that show. None of it mattered, other than the fact that, you end up having literally your villains are the same villains of the 1921. It's the Klan. It's literally the Ku Klux Klan, except now called the 7th Cavalry.
Right.
And to me, I'm like, really? You know, you're dealing with Dr. Manhattan, who, by the way, apparently, and while I understand he's not a very good boyfriend, you bring back Laurie Blake, or Laurie Jaspesic, or whatever you call her.
Yeah, the Silk Spectre of the second Silk Spectre. Yes.
Apparently, you don't see why they break up. There's no flashback scene seeing the end of their relationship or whatever.
I don't know. Go on.
He just
not in the TV show, but obviously it's in the comic why they broke up.
Right? No, of course, but they never referred back to that. You just have the, and I really think
I don't know.
Here's what I thought was very odd.
Yeah.
So, he's in love with her, and I've always been in love with you. We were always destined to meet. He's very Dr. Manhattan and all of that. But I just felt like, the smartest woman in the world is a small Asian woman that is, she's created all these companies. She totally knows what's up.
Right.
And at the end of it all, the whole thing about the end of Watchmen was that Adrian Veidt, his motivations were whatever. He had a god complex, but he basically made it work. He did stop the doomsday clock from hitting midnight, and that was dealt with. But at the end of this movie that talks all about racism, all about black and white race relations, and you make white supremacists the villains, you basically take this little Asian girl.
Yes.
And you basically, the end is that, you're just going to make her, she just wants to become Dr. Manhattan, and let's kill her for that. So apparently, where we've got the Harvard University, which is having Ivy League schools, which are having problems with admissions because they're being accused of, there's a predominant number of Asian students who are doing the work and getting smarter than, say, American students or white students. So they're having admissions quotas and issues, and people are getting sued. Yep. So you introduce in a show that's supposed to be dealing with racism about black America and white America, you introduce your ultimate megalomaniacal villain is an Asian woman who's the smartest woman in the world, who owns everything, and, she's too ambitious, so let's kill her. She wants to do the same thing as the white supremacists. Well, you can kill them. It's okay because they're white supremacists. But then you turn around and you kill her, too, because God forbid somebody like her should be let into Harvard. And I'm like, what is this show really saying?
Wow.
I mean, you're coming out, and you're coming out against racism. You're dressing up your show to show how woke you are, as long as the people that you're showing that you're woke. I mean, I don't think that Asian women would come out and watch Watchmen and be like, oh, so Damon Lindelof is a real fan of Asian culture and our ambition, isn't he? And I'm like, what the fuck is this show actually saying?
Wow.
And I'm looking at this. By the end of the you have all of this politics in the front of the show. You never have, like, Angela Abar's best friend is Don Johnson. Right?
Yes. Well, almost a father figure to her. Absolutely.
They survived a father figure. Does she ever deal with the fact that she finds out that he might have been leading? He was actually the de facto leader of these white supremacists that actually came in and killed all the cops?
Yeah.
Like he was a double agent? What did that revelation do to her? So all of this highfalutin, high-minded, I'm so woke bullshit ends up falling apart in that show, and it gets reduced to a half-baked, it seems like it's really smart. Aren't we so intelligent? But when you watch what happens when you get to the end of that show, you're like, fuck you guys. You guys don't even know what the fuck you're doing, because ultimately, one, you have literally made your villains white hooded Klansmen.
Yes.
That's what they are. And then you've also turned your little Asian woman into just as evil of a person. The smart Asian woman that's done all this good for the world ends up being this also megalomaniac that's just as evil as, she tortures elephants to get her drugs.
Yes.
How evil is she? And let's kill her too.
Well, even that first scene, though, with her, pardon me, when she meets the couple and then, about their baby and everything. That's a pretty harsh scene.
It is. But then what does that mean? So she's getting Adrian Veidt, her father, back and all that.
Yeah.
But it was like, I just thought the whole thing was I thought episode 6 with the whole Angela Abar when she's having her. Like, here's another thing.
Oh, when she's living her grandfather's life and everything?
Yeah.
With with nostalgia. Which, by the way, that's it. A lot of the little touches I really appreciated, like taking nostalgia, the scent of Adrian Veidt's company and everything, like a perfume or whatever, and now it's this like weird little memory-inducing drug and everything.
I thought all that was great. Unlike the people that make Star Trek, they did their homework.
Yes, they did. Pale Horse music poster for either the band or the club. I forget which the Pale Horse was.
There's so many callbacks to the Watchmen comic, which I loved. Because I read Watchmen so many different times. And
me too, man.
I love it. I love the comics so much. But at the end of the day, the storytelling, it suffers. These guys and girls think, Damon Lindelof thinks he's smarter than he really is. And I don't mean that personally. I don't. But everything that he's ever, it was kind of like, I used to watch The Leftovers on HBO, which is another show. And one of the things that used to bother me about that show was Scott Glenn's character, who was the former police chief, who was the father of the main character. His character is hearing voices. And the voices that he hears in the show clearly know what's up. Or there's something going on.
Right.
And so your son, who's now the main character, the chief of police, well, when you live in a world where inexplicably 2% of the population upped and vanished one day, if your father is hearing voices, when you live in a world where something like this inexplicable event has occurred, and your father is hearing voices, there's never one moment where the son says, Dad, can I just sit you down and talk to these voices that you're hearing? Because clearly they're giving you relevant information. Let me just have a moment. Let's just assume I just want to ask them because clearly they know something. It was the same thing that happened in Lost. Nobody ever sat down and said, man, like I told you earlier, God, it's pretty rad that we're traveling in time. It's 1970s, we're on this. Can you believe this is happening? Like, I wanted one episode of Lost where it was called The Dinner Party, where everybody just sits around and talks about what the fuck has been going on.
You did have Hurley deciding to rewrite the Star Wars movies, only write them better.
Yeah, you did.
Which I thought was pretty awesome.
No, that was good. But so I just you look at this stuff, and when I watched Watchmen, I was like, it tricks you into thinking that it's great because there's lots of great stuff in it. But I think at the end, when I got to the end, I was like, it was really interesting. Like John Osterman, they made it so, in case you don't know how woke this is, let's never show Dr. Manhattan's face until he's turned into a black man. They literally do that.
Yes.
And I was just like, that's really interesting to me because you're gonna hide. I mean, in case we needed something to be more relevant. And by the way, I don't mind that. I have no problem. Yeah. I thought, by the way, if you don't love Regina King, she's
amazing.
Madly in love. I mean, I've been madly in love with Regina King since she played Cuba Gooding's wife.
Yes, Jerry Maguire. Yes.
I mean, she was.
I agree. Boondocks. She's amazing in Boondocks, the cartoon.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Andrea Romano and I, when I had her on, I'm like, Regina King, what the fuck? I'm like, she's great.
The woman's a force of nature. And by the way, something that no one's made a big point about, Regina King's 48 years old, and Yaya, who plays her husband, Dr. Manhattan, is 32.
Attaboy,
so
girl.
That's what I was like. I was like, if this show wasn't woke enough, let's just show how a woman can be married to a man 20 or 15 years younger than her.
Absolutely.
Who's
hilarious.
A prime. I mean, if you don't want to look like that guy is one handsome man.
Dude, him and Mike Cotton, who used to be Luke Cage and everything,
dude,
it's like,
those
are two good-looking dudes. And Idris Elba. It's like, all right,
Coulter.
Sorry.
Mike Coulter.
Mike Coulter, of course.
He's my man crush.
When Jeff Loeb, when they cast him for Luke Cage, Jeff Loeb is like, Dude, you're going to go, like, this guy is the perfect Luke Cage. And he was brilliant as Luke Cage.
He's also just the most handsome dude ever. Like,
yes.
You know. and so, like, I'm a guy that I've always seen beauty in all. My first crush in my life was Lieutenant Uhura. And I didn't know what racism was or anything like that. And the first time I actually encountered it, when I was like 8, I was like, wait a minute, have you seen Nichelle Nichols in Mirror Mirror? How can you? Come on, man.
That bare midriff. Yes,
oh
absolutely.
My God, that kills me to this day. Oh,
yeah, she's lovely.
Amazing.
Too funny.
But I did think, like, I did appreciate the ambition of Watchmen and what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
But I really felt ultimately they used racism and what in a very strange way. And I thought that they lost that plot as they went along. The whole idea of, like, I never really understood. So when did Tulsa, Oklahoma become the focal point? I mean, I understand Lady True explained that her Millennium Clock, which was really all about transferring her essence, her killing Dr. Manhattan and becoming Dr. Manhattan. Right. Here's another thing that I didn't understand. The intrinsic field accident that created Dr. Manhattan in the first place didn't need another Dr. Manhattan to transform John Osterman into the Doctor.
True.
So why did they feel they had to kill the original Dr. Manhattan? Or why did they think they would transform him into them somehow when they could have just recreated the intrinsic field accident? Apparently nothing really special happened. He just happened to be locked into that room. So why didn't they just recreate that experiment from the 50s, throw somebody into the room, and do the same fucking thing? I mean,
that's a fair question. I don't know.
I mean, why build a Millennium Clock? They created Dr. Manhattan in Iguana Flats or wherever.
Right, in like 1958 or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, they know what happened. It was like, just do it again.
Interesting.
And I'm like, you've built this beautiful Millennium Clock. I really thought that, and I read a theory online that I totally agreed with because I thought the same thing was going to happen. I thought that Lady True, that her following in her father's footsteps, what Adrian Veidt wanted to do was bring peace on Earth. He really wanted to. That was his thing. Yes. He was the megalomaniac. Yes. He really did believe in the history of mankind, and he wanted to preserve humanity, and he wanted to bring peace on Earth by scaring us into peace.
Yes.
What I thought Lady True was going to do was use her nostalgia drug, and I thought that the Millennium thing that she was building was going to broadcast all of the memories that Angela Abar walks through from Hooded Justice, her own grandfather.
Yes.
Throughout the world into every human being's head. So they would have had an understanding. They would have lived a racist past where they had been victimized and they understood the victimization that went along. So America's racist past and racist present was shared en masse with the entire planet. And the entire planet would realize how ridiculous our hatred of one another based on color or gender or whatever was, and yet it would have left everybody psychically damaged. Sure. But then at the end of but then after it was all over, the peace that Adrian Veidt was keeping alive through subterfuge would have been based. People would have then looked at one another differently and realized our petty differences are just that, and we would have had horrible psychic trauma. And that she would have picked up on that, like the psychic trauma. They brought it up of the squid and how people were on the periphery of that, like Looking Glass was on the periphery of that psychic trauma. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, what if she was able to amplify that psychic trauma worldwide using those memories that she was able to get from Hooded Justice and do it across the planet? And somebody that came from Vietnam as she did. And I thought it would be global in nature. And then it turned out to be, I'm going to become Dr. Manhattan. The white supremacists and Lady True had the exact same plan to each turn themselves into Dr. Manhattan? Like, how does that happen? And why is it that these yahoos, the white supremacist yahoos that are building this device, and Lady True knew what they were doing, she's building her millennium clock, so clearly her technology is a little bit more advanced. I mean, all of it, I'm like, what? So it all just collapsed. The last two episodes, I'm like, what? Did anybody stop and really think about this and go, what is going on here?
That's awesome. I'll be honest, I wasn't thinking of that stuff when I was watching those last episodes.
No, because it's all a trick. It's all a trick.
Right.
They make you not think about all of this stuff. I mean, and that's what I don't like. They never play fair with the audience. They never awesome. they withhold rather than tell a story. Their stories are created by withholding the story that they're supposed to be telling. They withhold it and dole it out to you in drips and drabs until you get it. And I'm like, this is not good storytelling. And Watchmen had me until I realized, I'm like, oh, none of this actually, all of this racism talk and the Tulsa massacre, great way to give us relevance immediately. But you didn't pay any of that off. What does that mean? In the last two episodes, where's your commentary about racism as you're killing the uppity Asian woman and as you're, eliminating a bunch of other people? It made me angry. However, up until episode 6, it was really great TV.
Interesting.
And also the Adrian Veidt, like Ozymandias creates or asks Dr. Manhattan, "Oh, please send me this paradise." And Dr. Manhattan's created this. It isn't paradise, and these people that he created, these poor saps, that have no desire. They have no creativity, and they have no love, and they're just going to... He's basically created... This was another thing that they never really got into. But Dr. Manhattan, in creating life as the Ubermensch, the uber white guy, he creates a slave race of white people.
Yes.
That are just there to love you and to serve their master. Yep. Well, what does that say in terms of your... Is it okay now for all of these English white people to be in? You've created a planet of slaves to serve you and to love you. Is that okay because they're white? Like, what does that all mean? And it was so strange, and to the point where I get these people grow in the pond or wherever Adrian harvests them from, and they're so expendable. These new sweet people that just want to serve, that he massacres them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what message is this show sending ultimately? Anyway.
Hilarious.
I watched it and I was perplexed. I really don't understand what the show, when it comes to all of that, what is it saying? What am I supposed to glean from that?
Interesting.
And ultimately, it just comes back to, I guess Angela Abar may or may not be the new Dr. Manhattan. I mean, come on.
Are we getting a second season?
I don't know. As Lindelof said, we didn't design it that way. But I just look at this and I'm like, Damon Lindelof reminds me of the people when I was in high school in the drama club. And the people in the drama club thought they were the smartest. Yes, we'll talk about Harold Pinter and we'll talk about August Strindberg or whatever. That's why it was so funny to me to watch the new season of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which I love.
Me too, man.
Jane Lynch's character wanted to be in a Strindberg play. I'm like, yes, of course, I have to show my chops by being in a Strindberg play. And I just feel like Damon Lindelof and all the people at Bad Robot are all, they're rich and they're successful, and I'm not jealous about that, but they feel like the kids I went to high school with who thought because they were in the drama club, they were better than everyone else. And I would think, the people on our basketball teams, on our football teams, they work really hard too. They just don't know who August Strindberg is. And that doesn't necessarily make you better than them. And I feel that way when I am watching anything that the Bad Robot crew is making, because I'm waiting to see one thing that comes from them that doesn't screw the pooch in the end.
You're killing me. That's fantastic. I'll tell you what I liked about the Watchmen series. I did like Jean Smart as Laurie.
She was incredible. She was incredible.
And she's always incredible, honestly, man.
So good in that show. Yes. She was given that scene when she's in the booth talking to Dr. Manhattan.
Yes.
I mean, look, you can't deny that the Watchmen TV show had some incredible television in it.
Yeah.
And that episode 6, the whole story, although, another thing I didn't understand, I mean, I get it. I guess I'm supposed to get it because I've seen other movies and TV shows that deal with this. But suddenly, Hooded Justice is, in a same-sex relationship with another guy.
Well,
he's married and has kids, and I know they've insinuated all that, and that was part of the putting on the hooded thing, but the way it was presented in the show seemed a little out of nowhere for him, for that particular character.
That's interesting, and I can appreciate. You see, that's good that you're able to separate what we got on the TV show from the comic, because given what we know in the comic about Captain Metropolis and Hooded Justice and everything, and even that, do you know about that great when Laurie and Dan Dryberg, the second Night Owl in the comic, are having a dinner? There's that one background scene, and it's Hooded Justice and Captain Metropolis as old men.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
And that's so cool that, I guess technically they could have lived and, still had their relationship or whatever, even though they were both presumed dead by the actual official history of the Watchmen universe.
But I thought that was just an extra added layer. Like they didn't. It was like,
I hear what you're saying.
We're gonna, they dealt with the fact that he was in a same-sex relationship, which is fine. But then he goes back to his wife, and that never came up again.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
They never dealt with that again, and I'm like, that was because you see that actually you see Looking Glass watching his Captain Metropolis Hooded Justice gay porn, or was that the TV show that they're watching, whatever.
Yeah.
And it was all very like why throw that in? I mean, I understand that but it was like we need to make this show. Let's touch on every marginalized group in Watchmen. Let's just make sure we touch on it all. But none of it came together at the end for me.
I understand. No, and I think you make valid points, honestly. I just hadn't thought about it while I was watching the window dressing and really wasn't paying attention or questioning things. And truly, I know I've had a similar conversation about Discovery to other friends who are like, I don't know, that didn't bother me. And I don't, again, I'm not to invalidate what you're saying at all, because I get it, and I think you're right. And there's definitely, things to question about those motivations of how those characters were developed and stuff. I don't know. Like I said, the Vietnam flashback stuff I thought was really interesting. Oh, we got to see a post Dr. Manhattan Vietnam.
I love,
which
don't get me wrong. That's the thing. I half loved Watchmen.
Yeah.
There was, as a fan of the comic, there was so much in it that I liked, and I will say this: I loved the respect that was paid to the source material.
Yes,
you could tell that. And by the way, the ambition on display on that show. I mean, I got to hand it to David Lindelof. He went for it, man.
Yeah,
and he really brought so much ambition to what he was doing. It really is. I think. I mean, I'm holding this to a very high standard, and as far as it goes, I do think that it's very much worth watching. And there's so much great stuff. I mean, Angela Abar is one of my favorite television characters I've seen in a long time.
Great badass. Regina King did a hell of a job.
And Jean Smart was incredible. And I loved. I did love Looking Glass. And I did look.
Interesting character. Yes.
Did I like Jeremy Irons' portrayal of Adrian Veidt? I liked him when he was actually being Adrian Veidt. I didn't like him when he was all crazy, but that was fine. I didn't know what was happening. But I loved Lady True. I loved her.
Yep.
And by the way, she should have fucking won. If that show was, she should have won. And the show should have ended when she becomes Dr. Manhattan, Dr. Manhattan. She would the little Asian Dr. Manhattan, maybe the baby Yoda of the Watchmen universe. And the show should have ended. What next?
Yeah.
There she was standing there, and because she was one step ahead of everybody the whole time, she should have won. If the show had real balls, she should have won. And she should have become Dr. Manhattan, and the show should have ended with her walking off with humanity's destiny now in question.
Interesting.
Because that's how I would have ended the show. Because that would have been the thing like, oh my God. The fact is she was totally ahead of everybody the whole time, and she should have won.
Interesting.
And I thought the fact that she didn't win, I mean, it's not like one of the great moments in any comic, and they didn't even do it very well in the movie. But when they're at Karnak at the end, and when Adrian Veidt says, I'm not some Republic serial villain, Dan. Do you think I would, whatever he says, do you think I would describe my master stroke if there was any chance of you affecting its outcome? I did it 38 minutes ago. Yep. And then you turn the page, it's issue 11, and you just see it's the same frame of Rorschach and Night Owl. Oh. It just dissolves each panel, and it finally just dissolves to white. And that's the end of the comic.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking of the scene of Manhattan after the squid and everybody dead with their eyes, burnt out,
Yeah, like the first, that's the first 8 pages. It's all 8 splash pages of 12. Issue 12.
There you go.
I remember reading, people don't understand. It's hard to make people understand what it was like to read Watchmen when it was coming out because...
Absolutely, man. Go on.
It was a commentary on the entire comic book medium and superheroes as a genre. And when you get to that, when he says, I did it 38 minutes ago or whatever, and they're just looking at each other like, and you as the reader were with Dan and Rorschach, you're like,
yep.
Oh, shit. Because that never happened in a comic book before. He already did it. New York is ravaged, and you're like, and the way it faded to white. It was the very first time I ever read a comic book where I had to pick my jaw up off the floor.
I understand. It reminded me, as you describe it, of that what if issue of Korvac beating the Avengers, and he becomes one with the universe and he can't handle it, and he has the ultimate nullifier, and it dissolves to white, and it ends with suddenly everything, disintegrated to nothing.
Right.
It ends with a white page. And then you got this little box of the Watchmen going, this is one of the most disturbing of the alternate universe I've ever witnessed. And it's like, Jesus, man, I almost shit my pants when I read that back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
I think, so I get it, and you're right about that. No, and also, it's so funny because I've heard other people discuss why they didn't watch the show or what they didn't like about the show. And what you said, it was the metatextual parts of the comic, down to the fact that the 9-panel grids that were so prevalent in the 40s, especially and stuff, and that it was just that kind of that's how they told stories and everything. So of course everything was in most of it was in a 9-panel grid like that. And and people were like, well, they can't replicate the comic, and it's like, of course they can, because a lot of it had to do with the mechanics of a comic book as much as the story itself.
Right.
So there's no way it could be like the comic. It never will be. Don't worry about that. It's okay.
Yeah.
But I liked a lot of it. Like you said, there was a lot of really good stuff in there, and I was surprised because I was nervous. I love Watchmen, and I even liked aspects of before Watchmen as much as I'm very torn because on the one hand, first of all, Dave Gibbons, an incredible guy. Yeah. I don't know Alan Moore. I respect his work, and I certainly respect his wishes. That said, I was intrigued I wouldn't mind reading other stories about the Watchmen characters. And I would say about half of them were interesting, and the other half not so much. And I didn't know what to expect from this television show, and I have to say, on balance, I liked a lot more of what I saw and everything. But like I said, I completely see what you're saying about the last 2 episodes in particular.
Yeah, look, all of that stuff with it suddenly went from this really intriguing show to being this plot-driven superhero tale, and literally, are they gonna get everybody away? And it just degenerated into, an episode of T.J. Hooker. Almost. I know that's not. It's just that to me, it would have been far more interesting if they had kept the idea that these white supremacists could steal Dr. Manhattan's power. I mean, both Lady True and the white supremacists were actually doing the same thing. And I'm like, wait a minute. They just all decided they came up with this plot at the same time and all that. And they're all both in Tulsa. It would have been great if I had made that show. She would have become Dr. Manhattan because she was very smart. But now what? Now that a human being who knowingly, the whole thing about Dr. Manhattan was the tragedy is he never wanted that. It was a terrible, horrible thing, and it turned him into this god, and he lost his humanity because the thermodynamic, he was literally could see through atoms and see time as it happened and as it was going to happen, as it did happen, and he was slipping away when the comedian even says, you're leaving. You could have stopped me from killing her, but you didn't. You're slipping, Doc, in Vietnam. Comic, there's that great scene. Yes. And it would have been really interesting if, in fact, Lady True had succeeded. And then you could have played the whole, when Neil Gaiman took over Miracle Man from Alan Moore, and Miracle Man decides to shape the world in his image or try to create a paradise on Earth, it would have been really interesting to see a second season of that show with a woman of Lady True's intelligence who could do what Adrian Veidt couldn't do, being that he was – the idea that they gave her this father fixation too, I didn't like either. Like, I must have my dad here to prove how smart I am. I'm like, well, wait a minute. That takes away what your mother did for you. It was your mother that stole his sperm, and it was your mother that impregnated herself to create you. And the whole idea with the cloning, I've cloned my mother, and I'm using nostalgia to force her memories. I'm recreating my mom, younger than me. That storyline went nowhere.
Yes,
and what would have been what would have been interesting is if I had written this, Lady True would have succeeded in becoming Dr. Manhattan. And the reason that she cloned her mother was that she needed her mother as her tether to reality. I mean, a Chinese mother and the relationship she has with her daughter, what would Lady True's Dr. Manhattan need more than that? And that's why she cloned her mom. Because she needed that familial, that grounding, that love, the love that her daughter/mother would always give her. That's what would keep her in check, and that's what Dr. Manhattan himself never had, and that's why she did it. And I was waiting for that. I'm like, that's why she's done this thing, and that's why she's cloned her mom, because the show it had me a lot, and I was just like, God, I wish it ended better. It was like, how did they not do this? But then I don't want to be that guy that's like, well, I know better. I mean, I wasn't the one making it. I didn't write it. I didn't get HBO to spend the money. So who's the smart guy? Not me. Not me.
Did you finish Doomsday Clock, or are you still waiting? Trade waiting?
I'm waiting for. You know what?
Okay. Do you know?
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I followed it. And I'm just like,
yeah, I was really, I love Jeff. First of all, I have to admit, I know Jeff, on a personal level, he's always been a good guy, and 95% of the time I love his stories. I didn't feel like this one ended quite that well, and it just it ended with like kind of a fart rather than a real boom.
I'm looking at you've seen my set. I'm surrounded.
Yes.
By books and hardcovers. I have so much of Jeff Johns' work. I've got the absolute version of Blackest Night. I have his entire Green Lantern run, Aquaman run, Teen Titans run. I'm a big fan of Jeff Johns, and I've only met him twice. First time I loved him. The second time I wanted to punch him in the face, but I understood his reasoning. We met in a professional capacity where he had the ability to say yay or nay to a project. And he said nay for no reason at all. I'll never understand why, considering I wanted to do a 25th anniversary documentary about Sandman, and I wanted the creation of Sandman Overture, which was the 25th anniversary story that Neil Gaiman was beginning to create at the time. Mm-hmm. I wanted to use that as the backbone, him creating that story, but at the same time delve into the influence that Sandman has had as a comic book across culture, all culture. And I'd contacted Neil, And he had said, that sounds great. I'm in. Wow. So I went in and pitched the project to Diane Nelson, who was a friend of mine because she greenlit The Hills Run Red, a movie I produced.
Oh, so, awesome. Yeah.
So I go in there with basically this idea, right? And I pitched it. And she said, do you mind if Jeff Johns comes in and listens to this pitch? I'm like, yeah, no problem. Well, I had to, before I even developed this further, I had a very distinct idea about what I'm going to do. But when you're submitting a final proposal, you've already got the job. You're just settling on what the proposal is. Now, we weren't there yet. I needed to basically have a meeting where I get the okay from DC. And Jeff Johns said, your idea doesn't sound that formed yet. And I'm like, okay, I've produced documentaries for the X-Men movies, for Superman Returns, for Narnia, for Lord of the Rings. I was in the middle of working on Star Trek The Next Generation. I would think that my past experience for 15 years producing movies and documentaries would have at least given me enough consideration that by bringing them this idea, it would have been considered further. And I already had Neil Gaiman on board. And he killed it in a room. Ish. And I was like, I don't understand. And by the way, there was Neil Gaiman documentaries made after that, but nobody made a documentary about the 25th anniversary of the Sandman. Nobody made a documentary on the creation of Sandman Overture, and much less, I honestly believe that Hot Topic, the mall store's Hot Topic, part of that was because of the character of Death. Neil Gaiman's character of Death, Emily the Strange, how many characters were derived out of Neil Gaiman's Death, and how many girls started reading comic books because of that?
100%, man.
And I wanted to do all of that. I was going to make this epic documentary. Sandman's still my favorite comic book of all time.
It was incredible.
And because it's a comic book that's about storytelling.
Yes.
It's about the power of stories.
Yep.
And I was very upset. So I had met Jeff Johns once. I'd had dinner with him with a bunch of friends, Jason Pritchett, a friend of mine, and we all had dinner at Musso and Frank's.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And it was a great dinner. We talked a lot. What's funny? Jeff Johns secretly told me at that dinner, he said, I might get to write Teen Titans. And
the comic?
Yeah. And, of course, I have this gigantic Teen Titans omnibus right on my shelf over there. And I'm like, oh, my God. And we talked about the original Wolfman Perez Team Titans.
Sure.
And the Teen Titans. But the Teen Titans, and we love them. And I was so excited for him that he was going to get this opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's why it was disappointing when I was in a room with him years later and how he just killed this idea. And I was like, you don't understand. I'm like, how can you? First of all, I'm not used to people saying no to me. There have been seldom times when I pitch documentary ideas and stuff like this where people say no. And I was like, but why? I'm not even asking you guys to give me money. I could have made the documentary myself using Neil Gaiman and done it. The other documentaries have been made outside of the purview of DC.
Sure, unauthorized. Yeah.
And I figured since Diane Nelson, who at the time when I first was working with her, she did greenlight a movie I produced for Warner Premiere. So we had a relationship where she already knows I delivered a feature film that I said I was going to deliver that I brought to her in the first place. So I figured it would pretty much be a done deal. But he killed it.
Wow. I'm sorry, man.
It's all right. Hayes, again, he doesn't care. Look, he's much more successful than me.
Have you watched? Go ahead if you want.
No. I mean, clearly he's doing something right.
Have you watched the CW crossover?
Yeah, I thought it was a mess.
That I didn't like the first episode. I found that very ordinary, but I have to admit I like the second too. It's fun. It's not perfect, but I'm interested to hear what you think. I'll tell you, for me, the second episode with Kevin Conroy getting the chance to be Bruce Wayne, and more than just a cameo, but really being a featured player on the episode, was very satisfying.
Oh, I thought so too. And I have to say, having been with Brandon Routh in Australia and worked on Superman Returns, I have often said to people that if DC made a Superman movie and if Henry Cavill's not going to play Superman again, you could totally do another Superman movie and bring Brandon Routh back.
Absolutely.
I loved seeing him again. And it's funny. He and I flaked on him in a bad way.
During Superman Returns?
No, later.
When?
I shot his wedding video, and because of what was going on in my personal life, it's funny. I have it on my computer. I cut it together.
Okay.
I just never finished it, and I never finished his. And he came and got the tapes back for me that I'd shot, but and he was very disappointed in me. And I love Brandon, and I can still give him his wedding video, the cut together one, because it's pretty good.
Maybe an anniversary present.
I know, right? It's been what, 12 years, but I'd love to see, because nobody deserved. Brandon Routh is one of the nicest human beings on the planet Earth, and I don't think the position he was thrust into on Superman Returns and the working with an acting coach, working out the most grueling workouts in the world. I mean, that guy and Lonely Nights playing Warcraft, he was not partying. He was not going out. He loved his girlfriend. And that guy, nobody deserved more success than Brandon Routh. And I have to say, I got teared up, man, when I saw him as the Kingdom Come Superman.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, why? If I was at DC right now, I would totally make a sequel to Superman Returns. Because why not? Why not?
Well, or like you said, at least make a new Superman movie and let him be Superman again. Because I think you're right. I think he proved Johnny Bravo, Brady Bunch. He fits the suit.
Oh my God, he was so good.
He was terrific. Yeah. Absolutely, man.
Yeah,
the gravitas. I mean, as older Clark Kent.
Oh.
I mean, those Daily Planet scenes and the photos on the wall, and your heart's going out to it. And of course, the John Williams music only helps.
Yeah.
But it's like, holy fuck, it's Superman. It's just like, and I think you and I talked about this regarding James Bond. I thought as Timothy Dalton got older, he looked more and more distinguished. And I'm like, I want to see 50-year-old Timothy Dalton play James Bond because he can do it. And it would be great.
I mean, we saw 55-year-old James Bond with Roger Moore in A View to a Kill.
There you go. And how old was Connery during
Never Say Never
Again? Which I really feel ages much better, and I love looking at it now. I mean, then I was like, oh man, he looks kind of old. And now I go back and watch those and think, oh my God, he's James Bond again. This is fantastic. Yeah. I love every minute of this.
I mean, Klaus Maria Brandauer and Barbara Carrera. The only problem with that movie is the music score. Michel Legrand's music. It's just, it's
and
not.
that theme song is pretty rough too.
Yeah,
It's you're killing me. You're right. That's very 80s.
When I was in New Zealand, when I was in Australia working on Superman Returns in 2005, there was a guy in Perth, Australia, that had done a new version of Never Say Never Again, where he stripped out all the music somehow and he rescored it using David Arnold and John Barry's music.
Fantastic.
And he used the Propellerhead song History Repeating that Shirley Bassey sings, that we also was the original theme song for Free Enterprise until they put it in a Jaguar commercial. But he did that, and it was like a whole different movie. I'm like, wow, this is like a real James Bond movie now.
Oh, that's really cool. Oh, my God. That's like the Phantom Edit or whatever.
Yeah.
The de-assified Batman and Robin.
Yep.
That's excellent, man. No, Brandon Routh is great. I'm bummed that they knocked him off as early as they did in the third chapter. I'm like, oh, they should have pushed it a little bit longer, man. But I get it, and I like the changes. I like Superman dying in Supergirl's arms. That's fun.
Right.
I have to say, and I mean, some of the cameos really were pretty lightweight.
Right.
But in fact, my buddy Mitch Halleck, who has Terrificon in Connecticut, Robert Wool did his show a couple times, and he was in conversation with them after this summer when he was in the show at the convention. And Mitch asked Wool, he's like, hey, are you going to be in this crossover? And he's like, what are you talking about? And he goes, oh my God, he goes, they're going to do this big crossover for the CW. You'd make a great cameo. And Mitch is friends with Mark Guggenheim, the showrunner for Arrow, and the man behind the crossover. And he's like, hey, you want Robert Wool for a cameo? And boom, we got it. And isn't that great? I love when shit like that happens. Yeah, it was fun. I mean, and the Burt Ward moment was cute. The Huntress from Birds of Prey. She was great.
Some friends of mine, Ben and Derek, Derek Hughes and Ben Rabb, who were on Arrow, he was telling me a year in advance what they were trying to do, and I'm like, you're never going to be able to do that.
Guggenheim told me too, man. Absolutely, go on. Yes,
and they did it. I mean, I thought all of that was very, very, very cool.
Mark said every year for the crossover, he'd get a little bit more. But yeah, they've been trying for years to do exactly something like this, and finally they finally get it. That's at the CW, and it's like, yeah, actually, maybe this makes sense. Okay, you guys go ahead and do it. And no, it was the Smallville scene was fantastic. I loved that.
Yeah,
I thought it was fun.
No, it was great. I mean, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's.
I mean, I agree with you. It's not perfect, and I mean, I'll be honest. The CW shows are starting to burn on me. The length of the seasons really hurt the shows because you have so many inconsequential episodes.
The Flash had some really bad filler episodes. Well, the season's not over, but filler episodes. I was like, whoa.
There you go.
Yeah. That absolutely.
So yeah, but I mean, again, we'll see how the last two go and moving forward. And I'm intrigued by some of the shows that they've got coming up. I love Black Lightning. I keep saying if Black Panther hadn't existed, Black Lightning would be getting a lot more press.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because I think it's a terrific show.
It's really good, really good.
Yep.
Yeah,
I was going to go ahead.
Oh no, I've really liked Black Lightning. I've always liked Black Lightning. I mean,
me too,
look, man. I like Jim Aparo and Mike Barr's Batman and the Outsiders. I don't know what that says about me.
No, it was a great. What are you talking about? That's a terrific series. Absolutely, man. And Trevor Von Eden and Tony Isabella for the original run back in the 70s. And I love, especially the first season and the pilot, where it's like, oh no, the comic book could absolutely be the backstory to this TV show. And I mean, God, I just saw him as, I forget the character's actor. I'm sure you'll know it right away. The guy who plays Gamby. That's Gans in 48 Hours and in the Cotton Club.
Oh, you mean James Remar?
James Remar.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yeah, he's terrific, man. He was perfect.
By the way, speaking of the Cotton Club, I think one of the most amazing things that happened in 2019 was Francis Coppola's Cotton Club Encore, where he went back in and recut. He got the Cotton Club and anybody who knows the story of the mid-'80s, I think it's 84, the story of Robert Evans and the Cotton Club and how it was financed. There was a murder, and Coppola directed it, and the final release version of the movie was okay, but it certainly didn't represent Coppola's vision. Well, this year, 2019, he went back in and recut the whole movie. And while the Dutch Schultz James Remar storyline is a little mafioso 101, what he was able to do was restore all of the scenes at the Cotton Club and added more to the Jeffrey Hines story, and it's much more balanced. And it's a whole new version of the movie.
I'm gonna have to check it out. That's awesome.
It just came out on Blu-ray a couple weeks ago. It's called Cotton Club Encore, and I was astonished by it. I was blown away. I looked at that and was like, "Oh my God, that's
awesome,
incredible!" And we live in a world of riches. We're getting so much awesome shit. I mean, there's a company in England called 1612 that's making die-cast Eagle transporters again, the 12 Space 1999, and the next set they're doing, I think the pre-orders go up like tomorrow. The collision course from this Christopher Lee episode with the giant the spaceship.
Yes.
That comes with an Eagle. They're making a die-cast. Who would have thought that you'd get a die-cast ship of Christopher Lee's ship from the first season of Space 1999? But we're getting one this year. 2020 is bringing us that ship. If you love this stuff, we live in wondrous times, John.
If I'll tell you, man, I'm glad I listen to Inglorious Trexperts every week because I learned about Stir, the Sinclair version of Pluto, basically.
Right.
If you know your Roku and those kind of channels and stuff, free channels with commercials, and they've got one of the channels is a nonstop Space 1999 channel.
Oh yeah,
both seasons, which is hilarious. Absolutely,
there's it's amazing what we're getting.
It's ridiculous, yeah.
But on the other,
like I told you, your film that you made that you re-edited with Peter Billingsley, Arcade,
yeah,
and you were talking about it so much, and it's Describe it for the listeners, Arcade.
Well, okay, so there was a company called Full Moon Entertainment, and it was run by Charlie Band. Charlie Band produced in the 80s movies like From Beyond and Reanimator and Dolls. He started Full Moon Entertainment, and Full Moon Entertainment made like Trancers movies and Doll Man and Subspecies, or even Doll Man versus Demonic Toys. And Full Moon had an output deal with Paramount. So every month, pretty much, in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, Paramount would put out a Full Moon movie pretty much once a month. And they made a movie called Arcade that starred John Delancey, Peter Billingsley from A Christmas Story, Megan Ward, Seth Green is in it. And it was directed by Albert Pune, who directed The Sword and the Sorcerer. And it was a movie where kids get sucked into a video game. And they fight this evil entity, Arcade. Well, when the movie was made, Full Moon movies were made very quickly, and they were made on $1 million budgets, even less than $1 million. So the finished version of Arcade, all the stuff inside the video game was not shot on 35mm film, but was shot on digibeta. So since the movies were finished on video, they didn't go to, well, most of them didn't have cut negative. The movie was cut very quickly, and then they dropped in these just horrendous video effects. They were terrible. So Paramount actually rejected Arcade. So it sat on a shelf, but Full Moon still owed them this movie. So a good friend of mine, Daniel Schweiger, who cut promos and behind-the-scenes stuff for Full Moon, was in charge. He wanted to step up and show that he could do more at the company. They said, okay, Dan, well, you have to prep Arcade. You have to put it out for release, so we have to have new visual effects done. You produce them. So Dan found a company in Canada called DHD Post-Image to do these rudimentary computer graphics. Kind of cool, but very early. I mean, this is imagine doing computer graphics for a major studio movie, but you only had a quarter per effect shot. Instead of $250,000, you had 25 cents. That's basically where we were at. So what had to happen was Arcade, they needed to rebuild the movie. So they go scan the negative again, retransfer it, you put it on videotape, and then he would drop in these new effect shots, and you'd recreate the movie the way it originally was, but it would have new effects. So to do this, Dan brought back Peter Billingsley, the actor, because Peter Billingsley only took the role in the movie because he wanted to learn post-production. So he was the assistant editor. Well, they couldn't get the editors, so Dan brought back Peter Billingsley, and then he hired me to work with Peter, sort of as his assistant, to put this movie back together. And this was back in 93. So we're looking at this footage, and I said to Peter, I go, there's a lot of footage here that's really good that wasn't in the original version of the movie. And he goes, yeah, we had to cut the movie like in 7 or 10 days or something. So we just went as fast as we could. And I'm like, we could probably make this movie a lot better. And he was like, yeah, but we're just supposed to make it the way it was. And I go, the reason that they rejected this movie was not just because of the special effects. It's because the movie sucked. And so I called Dan up, and I said, Dan, we could recut this movie and make it much better. And Dan's like, yeah, man, but have you ever cut a movie before? I go, well, no, but I got an A in editing at USC.
Very nice, absolutely.
And so he's like, so you've practiced editing? I'm like, well, but I've edited my whole life. I was editing Super 8 movies when I was a kid. Sure. And so he actually got it authorized that Peter and I were able to recut the first 10 minutes. So we recut the first 10 minutes, and they were blown away. They were blown away, and they're like, oh my God, okay, if you guys can turn the movie into this, you recut the film. So we spent 6 months recutting the whole movie on a tape system, so it was still linear editing, tape to tape.
Wow.
On a tape system, and then we were getting the new effects in. But what was interesting was where there used to be one effect, like this energy ball was chasing these characters so it would whip around a corner. I said to Peter, I go, since this is video, you can take the shot and show it go around the corner from left to right, but then we can turn the shot 90 degrees, and it can go left to right, down to up, and then right to left. by just repeating the shot and turning it around. So suddenly you've got a boom, boom, boom shot of this energy ball moving where it was just one. Now it's three. And it creates more tension and more sound effects and all that because it was video. And so we did that. So we took Arcade that was literally unwatchable garbage that Paramount deemed unreleasable, and we made it really mediocre. and I mean, look, it was a movie made for less than $1 million, and I think we turned it into something. For what it is, I learned everything I knew about post-production on this movie. I mean, I could tell you stories about. We worked with Alan Howarth to design the sound, who worked with John Carpenter for a long time. And wow. I learned so much about sound design and movies, stuff that I became a post supervisor because of that, and 6 months of my life. And so what was really interesting was in 1993, there still was the VSDA, the Video Software Dealers Association of America, and they had their it was like the Academy Awards of home video. And we were nominated for Best Independent Direct-to-Video Release in 1993, and we were beat out by another full moon movie called it was called Dragon something. But we were nominated for an award.
That's awesome.
And it was very funny because the editing credit on the film is Miles Winton, which was actually the name of the original editor's dog. And we got very big editing credits at the end that said additional editors, Peter Billingsley and Robert Meyer Burnett. And it was very fun. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I'm very proud of that movie. But, again, there's kids that are like, I grew up with that movie. I love that movie. I loved Arcade. I'm like, oh, my God.
Well, the cool thing is you had talked about it before, and the last time you talked about it, I'm like, I think I'm going to look and see if where it might be. It's on Tubi, Tubi, another aggregator of film and television that inserts commercials, so it's a free streaming channel. And so if you're curious what you just heard, I love stories like that. Or my buddy Dave Baker a couple weeks ago was on Word Balloon, and he was talking about the first screenplay that he ever got a chance to write, and it was Navy SEALs versus aliens. That was the pitch to this weird independent producer. And he wrote it. And he's like, I don't even know if the damn thing ever got made. And 3 days later, a Word Balloon listener is like, boom, on Netflix, Alien Invasion. And it's the Navy SEALs versus aliens movie that this guy wrote. He had no idea. He's like, I got to call the WGA, man. I got because right there, script by, story by Dave Baker. And I'm like, way to go, Dave. I'm like, look at that. You're legit, man.
It's so funny because so many people don't understand on the fringes of Hollywood how it all works, how the craziness, the wackiness that happens in the trenches. And it's just very funny because all anybody really knows is the success stories, or when you know the crazy stories, it's because you saw Ed Wood or something.
Yes.
But the daily workaday people in Hollywood can be toiling. You'll never know their names, and there's a lot of funny stories like that. And no, look, I love the time I spent working on Arcade. I really did, and I learned so much about movie making, and somebody paid me to do it. And we were making this stuff up as we went along, but it was because Peter and I were sort of uncompromising, and him and I, we didn't know each other. And Peter and I were in a room together working on this film, and we pretty much saw eye to eye, and we did a lot of other work after that. He went on, he executive produced Iron Man.
Yeah, that blew my mind. I heard you say that on your show. I certainly know a lot of his work with Favreau and everything, and Dinner for Five. God, I loved that show back in the day, the IFC show.
Yeah, I think
where they were, or Dinner for Four. I forget what you would. Yeah.
And it was Peter.
Way to go, Ralphie.
Yeah, Peter did. I don't know what he's doing now though, and I haven't talked to him or seen him in years and years and years. But we made some short films. We made a short film that won a Golden Scroll Award of Merit from the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films. An adaptation of Charles DeLint's story, The Sacred Fire. And one day I think I'm going to put that on my channel because I actually sold that short film. It was in a compilation of other short films called Midnight Follies. And my friend Eric Wallace, who is the showrunner on The Flash, I got his movie Dark Faith on that same compilation. back in like '94. It's just it's funny because you don't see there's so many stories that people will never know that are not on the IMDb, and
sure.
it's endless. I mean, the stories are just endless.
Well, and I really love what's happening right now on streaming with Tubi and some of these other channels and stuff that pick up these old movies, from the 80s and 90s that were direct-to-video or whatever, and Full Moon and The Asylum and other things like that are fun movies. And, it's weird. I mean, again, we're all expecting the oversaturation of streaming. We're certainly getting there with some of the other streaming services that are going to debut this year. Or my personal favorite, as I just talked about with my buddy, the film critic Matt Singer, we're talking about the Mad About You reboot. And, it's on Spectrum streaming.
How crazy is that?
Both the reboot and the streaming channel that it's on, because it's like, what? Where is this? I don't know how to get Spectrum streaming.
I have no idea. I mean, I've got Spectrum Internet. I have no idea that they. Yeah, I saw them. I saw Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt on some show. By the way, Helen Hunt was in the Trancers movies as well for Full Moon.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and it was one time I was hitting on her at a party.
I believe it. Oh my God, she's adorable.
Oh yeah,
good Lord.
She was.
Going back to the Mary Tyler Moore show when she was Murray's daughter.
Oh yeah, no, and it was funny. Nobody was. Some pool. It was a rap party for Trancers 2.
Tim Thomerson at his best.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
Jack Def.
It's so funny because one day I'm going to write my. It wouldn't be necessarily a Hollywood tell-all, but I'm going to write a book about like my experiences because they're and I'm going to call it. I don't know if I've told you this before, but or you saw my show. I was talking about the fact that when I was at the Cannes Film Festival with Free Enterprise at the Film Market, we went to this party at this chateau up in the hills above Cannes, and I was hammered. And it was really boring. I mean, everybody was, and I'm there to promote my movie, and there was all these, like, it was a chateau, and there's statues around the pool and stuff. So for whatever reason, it seemed like a good idea. I got up and made this big speech on the diving board saying that I was here to promote my film. I'm wearing a coat, tie, or something. I'm here to promote my film, and what I do now is to get all of you to come to my screening of Free Enterprise at the blah, 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 whatever theater tomorrow at 10 a.m., and I dove into the pool with my clothes on. And I thought other people would jump in. And a smattering of people, because after all, it was France, thought it was art. And they did follow me into the pool. And I did do that. But there was a picture taken of me in mid-dive. And it was actually in Empire magazine.
Wow.
And the caption on the picture was another nameless American director in a shameless act of self-promotion. And that's going to be the name of my autobiography. Another nameless director in a shameless act of self-promotion. I'm like, that's it, man. That is it. And that sums up the entirety of my career in Hollywood over the last 30 years. But I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And
dude, it's the journey.
Yeah.
And what seriously, man, no, and as you said, either you said it to me off the air or on the air in terms of I can't believe I'm still, YouTubing and what do I have to say? You get a ton of great stories, man. It's hilarious.
I know, it's just weird. I mean, the thing that I have to offer the most is I wish I could use my knowledge, my vast knowledge of all this material. I wish I could put it more to good use. And I still try. I do. I brought it to bear. I think Tango Shalom is a great example. I can't wait for people to see it. A short film that I edited called Sky Fighter drops on the Dusk channel on Dust is a really cool channel. They show shorts. They're on YouTube. They have a Roku channel, and They're using their short films as incubators for ideas to make features. They made a really cool feature called Prospect, science fiction feature called Prospect. But Skyfighter is a 15-minute short that was proof of concept of an upcoming feature that's currently they're casting it. And it was directed and written by Lucas Kendall, and I edited that. So that's coming out on January 23rd.
That's awesome. Right around the time of Star Trek Picard, of course.
I know, right?
No, and I either I heard about Prospect on your show or another friend told me about it, and I did just download Dust for my Roku and everything.
Yeah.
So, no, that's great. I'm looking forward to seeing Lucas's movie and Lucas's proof of concept, and hope it gets fully developed and everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it's funny that a sci-fi short that I edited drops the same day as the first episode of Picard. I'm like, yeah, we made this, we shot this in 2 days, and we shot it for 5 figures. So
wow,
there you go. It's only 15 minutes, but hey,
I'm looking forward to it. No, that's going to be great, man. I loved your. If you don't, are we okay for time? Do you got to go soon? I don't. Okay, great.
No, I just have to get up and go be on a YouTube show in the morning.
Oh, that's right, John's show. Yeah, I don't want to mess you up.
All good.
Okay, cool. I loved your theory the other day about the Bond franchise, and I know you're very excited for Bond 25. I know you're going to London to see the premiere, which I think is fantastic. But talk about your theory in terms of what might happen after Bond 25.
Well, I think that the Broccoli family, the Bond films are now in control of Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli, and I guess they're step siblings.
Yeah, Albert's second wife was Michael's mother,
right?
By marriage, and I believe it was it Dana? It was Dana Broccoli. It was the one that's on all the Bond behind the scenes. Documentaries that are in all the films,
right? That
went back to Criterion and everything. So yeah, I believe he's Dana Broccoli's daughter, and then of course Barbara, I guess was a product of their marriage. But anyway, yes, they are the keepers of Bond, right?
Yeah, they've been the keepers of Bond. I really think that this is just a theory. I really think that they're going to sell Bond after Bond 25 because they're richer than God. I mean, if you look at the Daniel Craig films, Skyfall made $1 billion. I mean, they've made so much money over the years. The Bond franchise has been so lucrative. I think that you retire. You've done so much, and after No Time to Die, it's the 25th James Bond movie. I think it's a perfect place to end. I mean, what are you going to do? Make Bond movies? They don't have to prove anything anymore.
Right. I agree with that.
And I really think that there's a time, it's been the family business since 1962, since Dr. No came out.
Yeah.
So I really do think that that they are going to, they're going to sell the franchise. Now, I don't know who they're going to sell it to. I don't know who might buy it. But I think that the James Bond franchise could do with a revamp and in the 60s, I love the Bond franchise. I'm a huge Bond fan. But in the
same way.
Yeah, in the 1960s when they were adapting Fleming's novels, and I honestly believe that if you want the purest distillation of what Fleming was writing is really From Russia with Love. I think that's
agreed.
It's really the purest distillation of literary Bond. And in the 60s, you had the greatest generation coming home from World War II, and in the 50s, they built the middle class, which didn't really exist. They built the middle class, and what Bond offered the world, because people don't know now, but the James Bond franchise was monstrously huge in the early to mid 60s.
Yep.
Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball. Those 4 films were ginormously huge. Star Wars huge. They were huge worldwide. And one of the things they did was most people hadn't flown on a jet before.
Yep.
And they offered a glimpse of a lifestyle, this jet-setting lifestyle, these exotic locations. Certainly Americans had never been there. And the world hadn't been there. And the James Bond franchise really caught on because in the same era of Playboy and Mad Men and all that, James Bond was the ultimate male icon. Yep. And it was wish fulfillment en masse, or writ large on the big screen. And it was really, culturally, it was very important because it was sort of the collective dream of all dudes to be James Bond at the time.
Totally.
And then as you moved into the 70s, and Bond, it's sort of, how many Bond movies could you make? But by the time Connery leaves in You Only Live Twice, then Lazenby comes in 2 years later to star as Bond. It didn't really work out. Connery comes back in 71 for Diamonds Are Forever. And then when Roger Moore took over, Bond was no longer this trend-setting new thing. Roger Moore was now chasing trends. Blaxploitation movies were big. Then we got Live and Let Die, martial arts films, Bruce Lee, the Asian influence. So we got Man with the Golden Gun. Yep. And Bond sort of really lost its way. And it wasn't until you came back in 77 with Spy Who Loved Me where Bond became this just, there was no semblance of spy reality anymore. It's underwater cities and giant ocean, oil tankers that swallow nuclear submarines, remaking You Only Live Twice. I mean, You Only Live Twice was outlandish too, but at least it was bracketed by Thunderball and then On Her Majesty's Secret Service, where it was back to skiing and Blofeld and girls and guns and chateaus and all that. So I just think that now James Bond needs. I think sometimes franchises come to an end.
That's true too.
And I really think that in our world of Mission Impossible and our world of all the stuff that we're getting, I just think that James Bond, perhaps, now that and look, they'll sell it and people will make more James Bond movies. But I think the Broccoli dynasty, excuse me, I think
no problem.
Perhaps it is a time to die.
Well, No Time to Die, of course, the title. I don't know, and I didn't even think of that until you made that suggestion, and also just the look at all the trouble all the other franchises are having in terms of a fan base, which I don't think is the same case with the Bond fan base. Although there might be the Bond critics who just, object to the existence of James Bond, given its anti-woke origins and really what made it what it was. In the 80s, they tried to correct it with Dalton and tone down the sex and the jumping from bed to bed with various women and stuff like that. I don't know, man. I don't know what a James Bond should look like post Daniel Craig or a reason to be. And I think you're right that it might be a good time for them after 25 movies and their age to say, yeah, that's enough. We're good. Especially Michael Wilson. Barbara Broccoli isn't that old. But, yeah, I don't know, man. And again, even as they've tried to possibly recast the Bond when we weren't sure if Daniel Craig was coming back, it just seemed like, they couldn't. There was no real candidate. No, that came to mind, or maybe they were keeping things under wraps. I don't really know.
Michael, I just looked up right now. Michael G. Wilson, OBE. He's an American British producer.
Oh, awesome!
And he's 77.
Sure.
And while his parents, definitely, as you said, Dana Broccoli and Lewis Wilson, and I think that sometimes, like, why. It's become so, making these movies is so perilous in terms of money, and they're so huge and they're so big.
Yeah.
And it's like, what more do they have to prove? And I think if you're going to leave Daniel Craig's era of James Bond, while creatively it's not been my favorite era of Bond. I love Casino Royale, but I think the rest of the Bond movies Craig's tenure has been fraught with storytelling peril.
Understood. And I like a couple of the movies more than you do, but I know and I agree with you in the general sense.
Yeah, and look, I'm looking really forward to No Time to Die, but what a way to go out.
Yeah.
25 official movies. You're leaving an incredible cultural legacy. Now, by the way, I'm talking out of my ass. I don't know.
Oh yeah, no.
I'm just saying that I have no idea what they're going to do, but I'm saying that if they're going to go, this movie is probably going to be huge. You're looking at between.
Oh yeah.
Even Quantum of Solace, which I'm an apologist for. I like Quantum of Solace more than most people.
I'm going to have to rewatch it, man. Yeah, I'm going to have to rewatch. I have it, and I haven't really rewatched it since the first time, and I really do because you're right. It is basically it's the continuation of Casino Royale.
Yeah, watch it as a double feature. One night, watch Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace back to back. Now they had the writers' strike they had to contend with.
Right, but, I remember.
It's still, I think it's much better than people give it credit for. But still, it's like, my God, 25 movies seems like the kind of number that you want to go out on. That's your legacy.
Yeah.
Maybe. And if No Time to Die, which, by the way, looks terrific, who knows? But you're coming off, you got Rami Malek, you got the Academy Award-winning Rami Malek coming off his turn as Freddie Mercury, playing a Bond villain. I mean, come on. Leah,
Mr. Robot, he's great.
You got the Ray Fiennes as M.
Yeah,
it's they've got a great cast, and I think going out on this fifth Daniel Craig Bond film, I just think it is, to me, I think it would be the time to walk away. Just like Lucas sold the Bond franchise the Star Wars franchise to Disney.
Sure.
I think put it up for grabs. And I do think that James Bond, I just don't know if James Bond belongs in the modern age. I
agreed. Yeah, I don't know either. Like I said, yeah. I mean, and especially rubbing up against, like you said, Mission Impossible, Jason Bourne.
Yeah.
I
mean, how do you do that? I mean, the character of James Bond, and when you keep look, the whole thing about James Bond is he knows every day could be his last. He's into his sensual pleasures. He drinks. He knows he drinks whiskey. He drinks women. He loves his food. He loves his fast cars. He loves the sensual pleasures of life because he knows any moment could be his last. And the idea,
Johnny Rivers song.
Yeah, the idea that people are going to pillory the James Bond character for that, it's so strange to me that we live in a world where nowadays, wanton sexual attraction to women for a character like James Bond is perceived as something that's bad. I mean, the guy is trying to save the planet. I mean, he's trying to save the world. And it's so weird, the world we live in. It's like, oh, are we not supposed to, as men, feel a sexual attraction to women? I got news for you, man. I love women. Women are great. When I see beautiful women, I don't know them, but when I see beautiful women walking down the street, or when I go to a party and a woman walks by in a great dress and she's wearing incredibly intoxicating perfume, do you think that I'm not going to respond to that? I am biologically programmed from thousands and thousands of years of genetic history to find women attractive, to find their secondary sexual characteristics alluring before I get to know them.
I'm with you.
Back in the Moonwatcher days when they just saw the monolith, they would club somebody over the head and drag their woman back home. There was no chit-chat. There was no talking. That was evolution, man. That was evolution. When the Moonwatcher figured out how to club someone over the head because the monolith told him.
That's exactly right.
I mean, it's so weird. It's such a bizarre thing. Like, oh, James Bond's a character from another time. The guy's saving the planet. He doesn't have time to be woke, or he doesn't care about your feelings, because he's either going to die or the world is going to end. So, give the man some pleasure. But oh no. As if women don't dig James Bond. I mean, come on. It's so funny to me.
I shake my head, and yeah, I am with you on that. So.
Come on, people. I mean, what world do we live in? It's so funny. I go back to the show I did yesterday. The same girl interviews Terry Gilliam and Armie Hammer and talk literally about the same subjects. One guy who's been a comedian and a humorist for 60 years, she says in a tweet she didn't dig interviewing him. Oh, but interviewing Armie Hammer was an experience because he's got size 15 shoes. By the way, that's in the article. I'm like, okay, let's talk about who's woke and who's not. Or let's talk about who wants to woke or wake up in whose bed. Give me a break. I mean, it was so funny to compare and contrast these articles. I just don't understand why we've started to deny our very biological realities. The world, it's so weird to me.
My favorite comic book example of that is when they get mad if a cover is a little too sexy of female heroes, and the same people are like, ooh, Nightwing's butt.
Oh, yeah. Milo Manara draws a Spider-Woman cover, and the world goes crazy.
Exactly. But Tom King and Tim Seeley's Grayson book, and there's a naked shower scene of Dick Grayson, and everyone's excited. Nightwing's butt. I'm like, okay.
I mean, it's just, and those same people are like, they're shipping Speedy and Nightwing together. Yeah, let's get two dudes together. I had a girl, Willow Yang, wrote to me, one of my favorite letter writers on my show.
Yes.
Talked about, I love shipping dudes together. I'm like, okay. It's good.
Is that, and boy, here's an old man thing. Okay, so the two guys getting together, basically shipping dudes?
Yeah, shipping dudes.
Is that like Kirk Spock Slash and everything? All right, I'm hip now. Okay.
It's such a strange thing to me that we live in a world, like, I wonder, like, do young people like go out? Do they meet people, or do you just go on Tinder and swipe left, swipe right? Let's hook up at this time at 4:00. And then I've got time off from work. I got to be back at 6. I'm like, so we live in such a strange world now. I
totally.
I don't know. I mean, man, I don't even. You can't even open a door for a woman anymore. You don't want to do something terrifying, and then I'm like, I've become that old white guy. The old.
Oh man, I haven't gotten shit yet that I'm aware of for opening doors, but I can appreciate what you're saying. That's hilarious.
It's just weird. It's just a strange.
Yeah.
It's such a strange. We live in a. I mean, you realize, you see the birth rates are plummeting across the world. In the Western world, birth rates are plummeting. Because everybody's too busy and they're doing their own thing. Romance is dead, and I think the Broccoli family is going to sell James Bond.
Let me ask you about. I am a proud member of SAG because the TV and radio unions merged with the Screen Actors.
Oh, right. Yeah, AFTRA, right?
Yeah, exactly. So now I get to vote for the SAG Awards, which is hilarious. This is my 3rd year. And I got my screeners, and I know you see a ton of movies, and it's great. And I'm incredibly envious of the LA folk because not only do you get to see, obviously, first-run movies and great things, but all the different, like, old Q&As that happen, and and this is 10 years ago when I shot Prophets of Science Fiction out there. My driver's like, I just went to this amazing Q&A, Elliot Gould, and it was for The Long Kiss Goodnight, right?
Long Goodbye. Long Goodbye,
excuse
the
me.
Robert Altman film.
Exactly.
Where he plays Philip Marlowe.
Yep, exactly. And I'm like, that would be great to see. I would love to hear Elliot Gould talk about that experience. That would be amazing. So... But anyway, I wanted to know because I've got the list of my screeners, and I know you've seen a lot of these, and I just want to know opinions. I'm going to give you the list, and you tell me movies that, and I'm sure one of the obvious ones, and we could talk about The Irishman, but other than that, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, Bombshell, Ford versus Ferrari, my personal favorite of the
my God, that Ford versus Ferrari is so good.
Unbelievable.
It's like an old school, it's just a powerhouse.
Yes.
Movie. I mean, it was so
better than Le Mans, as good as Grand Prix.
Oh
I
yeah,
would say.
Yeah, it was so good. I loved it. And A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is really good too.
I'll get to it, and I haven't seen it yet, and I'll be watching nothing but these movies for the next week or so. Like I said, Bombshell, Harriet, Hustlers, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, which I've seen, Judy, Just Mercy, Marriage Story, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Rocket Man, the Korean film Parasite, and Us. And I've seen Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Ford versus Ferrari, and Hustlers so far.
Oh, I mean, all of those are good. The only movie there that I didn't like was Us. Us was I think the most...
Yeah, the Jordan Peele film.
Yeah, the most crushing disappointment I had all year.
Yeah, coming off of...
Get Out. I loved Get Out. I love Get Out. I love what he was doing. And I thought Us was just, claptrap. That it was so, it amounted to nothing. I mean, I get where he was going, but I just thought, this is awful. I really, really, really disliked it.
I love Jojo Rabbit. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah.
I thought it was, it's so funny. A friend told me today they felt it was poor man's Wes Anderson. And I'm like, while I was watching it, I didn't think that. But after the comment, I'm like, well, I could see that, but I still really loved it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of Taika Waititi as a filmmaker. His movie, What We Do in the Shadows, have you ever seen that?
I'm aware of it. I still haven't seen it. I've seen the FX show, and I hear great things about it. The movie is
and he stars in it. He directs and stars in it. It is so funny. And his sense, I just love his sensibility, his comic sensibility. It's different than Wes Anderson.
Absolutely.
I think it's a lot more front and center. Where Wes Anderson's humor is sort of an overall world. This world itself is part of the humor, and whereas Taika Waititi's humor is very character based and a situational based, which is something I really like. Whereas Wes Anderson's humor is derived from this world that he creates. Holistic.
I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you.
But
no, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, but I like them both. I mean, I'm a huge fan of I've liked Wes Anderson's film since I saw Bottle Rocket.
Sure. Oh no, and I agree, and I'm a fan of both filmmakers, and of course Ragnarok as well. I mean, it's no, I think he's great. I didn't realize that was him playing Hitler.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Which was fantastic. Oh my god. And just also, I'm really glad that a film like that, with the audacity, for a better word for the comedy, walked that tightrope of being serious and also very funny at the same time.
Yeah.
And I thought really achieved it in a very positive way. It blew me away. And that and Ford versus Ferrari are like among my two favorite films of the year, no question, so far. And obviously I loved The Irishman. I thought it was as cinematic as it should be, and everybody came to play. And Pesci and Eddie Murphy, I keep saying, are like boxers, like when Sugar Ray Leonard came out of retirement and beat Marvin Hagler. Only in the cases of, I think, Eddie Murphy and certainly Pesci, they scored knockouts. I just think I loved Dolomite is My Name, and I loved Irishman.
Yeah, I loved Irishman too. And by the way, I mean, I thought Irishman is such a the end of that film, like the last 45 minutes, was just the whole. It was such a capper on. It had so much to say about the end of this life and the end of the world as far as their world was concerned, and what it all amounts to or what it all doesn't amount to. I mean, it was so sad. All those guys are in prison with one foot in their grave, and it's just what did it all lead them to? Not much.
No, and just De Niro's character's disintegration as well.
Yeah.
And just as you see him slowly dying and ebbing away.
Yeah.
And no, it's amazing. And the performances were excellent. And I'm glad that he got the gang back together for one last great movie, and I think he achieved it. And it will be interesting to see as award season continues, the hardware that picks up. I'll tell you, I'm going to have to finish Hustlers because, and I'm a red-blooded American man that appreciates the female body.
Sure.
And strippers and mobsters, you had me at hello. I don't know, man. 20 minutes, I'm like, I'm not really digging this. I'm checking out.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think one of the problems that we have is, we just don't have I think we don't have the well-rounded filmmakers in terms of, and maybe this is just me waxing rhapsodic about a bygone era, but in terms of what people know, like general education today, I feel that our filmmakers of yore were far more educated about the world, just in general. So when you would see movies like when Scorsese was coming up, a guy that grew up, he wanted to go into he was going to be I think he was going to be a priest at one point, and he grew up in a world, he grew up in the 60s and the 70s, and he just lived a life that people nowadays don't. So the movies that we're getting, and this isn't true of all movies, but movies like Hustlers needed more of a street smart, like somebody who actually was there. The thing about Todd Phillips,
too glossy. It's too glossy. Go on.
Exactly. And you're making a movie about a strip club. Scores and what was going on.
Yeah.
And there is, I mean, when you live through 70s New York, you know what seedy is. And it's funny.
What was that HBO show? Or the Max show?
Deuce.
The Deuce, of course. Howard Chaykin is like, and I love that he says this. He goes, I watch it and I'm looking for myself in the background.
Yeah.
That's how authentic it is. Go on.
Yeah, and he's right. God, I love Howard Chaykin.
He's hilarious. Go on.
He's one of my favorite comic book artists and creators.
Genius.
Yeah, I mean,
and a friend, which I love the fact that we're friends.
I love Howard Chaykin so much, and American Flag. Why hasn't that been made? I don't know. But the Todd Phillips, really began. He went to film school, and he made a documentary about Gigi Allen, the punk singer.
Oh,
and he made a documentary in the 90s called Hated that was about Gigi Allen. Gigi Allen was a punk singer who died of an overdose, but he was known for his extreme punk music shows where he would literally take shits on the stage.
And
smear it all over himself. So Todd Phillips, Todd Phillips made a documentary called Frat House, a real documentary, although he was accused of staging scenes, but he went to upstate New York and participated in the hazing rituals of people. So he's not somebody who just decided to make a movie like Joker. I mean, he has a long career. I know people are like, well, he made the Hangover movies. Yeah, but if you go see the G.G. Allen documentary, he was in touch with the seedier side of life. There was an authenticity that he did bring to Joker, not just ripping off Martin Scorsese movies. So, and I feel
that's good to know.
I feel part of the reason that Joker worked as well as it worked was not just because of the Scorsese influence, but it was also because Todd Phillips has a bit of a punk rocker in him, and he understands that sort of street level degradation because he's made documentaries about it. So, yeah, if you go and you look up G.G. Allen and the Hated documentary that he made, that was a big staple of independent cinema. Film Threat used to sell that documentary in the pages of its magazine. So, Todd Phillips has been around a long time, and he did bring, I think the reason Joker worked and the reason people connected with it was, even if you hadn't seen King of Comedy or Taxi Driver or something, the idea of the healthcare system, the mental health care system, and all of that really resonated with people. And I think he did capture a certain truth that not many filmmakers could have captured. And I think that's because of his background as a documentary filmmaker and making movies for the last 25 years. And I think the people that make movies like The Hustle, or Hustlers, not The Hustle, that's different. That was the remake of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. But Hustlers, it's like you said, it's too slick. It's too, I mean, a strip club is inherently sleazy. And they did touch on it, but in almost a cartoon sort of a way. If you want to tell that story, you can't ever convince me that the women, I mean, I've known a lot of strippers in my life, and it's not like they're the most empowered. I mean, now it's different. I know cam girls. I mean, the world has changed.
Sure, it has changed.
It's changed, and there's a lot less stigma to all of that. And I know a lot of girls that have been making a lot of money. But it's interesting. Again, it's all become anonymous. It's all, let me go online. I don't even have to go anywhere. I don't even have to leave my bedroom, and I can make money. I don't have to go to a strip club anymore.
This is true. No, you're right about that. What intrigued me about Hustlers was the idea that J-Lo, it seemed, obviously, from just the Entertainment Tonight level interviews she does, it's like, all right, J-Lo wants some hardware. J-Lo wants to be recognized for her acting again.
Right.
So I'm really putting an effort in this. And I'm like, okay, I love Blood and Wine. I loved Out of Sight, those early J-Lo films where I'm like, okay, there's something there. Good for, she was interesting. It's been a long time since those movies, man, and there's a lot of shit in between. And sometimes that's not anyone's fault. You pick the wrong things. And also, as I was telling Matt Singer, I'm like, hey, Travolta made a mile of shit before he found himself again in Pulp Fiction.
Right.
So it can turn around, and that's why I'm like, all right, we'll try, but I don't know. I'll see. Maybe I'll revisit it. I don't know. But of the others that I haven't seen yet, I do want to see Beautiful in the Day in the Neighborhood. I'm really intrigued by Bombshell because I think Jay Roach has been doing good non-comedies. Yeah. I liked Game Changer or Game Change, whatever it was called.
I love
the Sarah Palin movie.
I love the new. Yeah, I really like Game Change a lot.
And Bombshell, I really enjoyed the Russell Crowe Showtime show.
Right.
Same subject and everything, more about ales.
Yeah.
But no, I haven't seen it. Have you seen Bombshell yet?
No, that's the one I haven't seen. And
okay.
I need to see it. But I really do. I love, any story about news. I loved All the President's Men. I love The Paper. I love Spotlight. I don't know why I love movies about journalism, but I do.
Did you see Rob Reiner's movie Shock and Awe?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What'd you think?
I like that a lot, too.
Me too, man. Me too. And especially, I heard Reiner, I want to say either on Mark Maron or Gilbert Gottfried, talk about how Alec Baldwin was signed to do the movie, and after a week or two bailed. And that's why Rob Reiner stepped in and took over the Baldwin part.
Wow.
Because it intrigued me even more, because then it was, as it was coming out, he talked about that. Yeah, and he's like, I kind of had to step in as an actor. And I'm like, I like Rob Reiner as an actor. I'm cute. And the whole thing about Knight Ritter's coverage of the first Iraq War and everything, and I thought Woody Harrelson was great. So I'm like, yeah, no, or actually, I guess it was the second Iraq War.
Yeah,
but I thought it was a great. I'm the same way. I love The Post. I'm a sucker for broadcast movies and television,
yep.
And I'm a sucker for especially journalism and newsrooms and stuff.
I haven't seen the morning show yet, the Apple show, but I really want to see it.
Yeah, me neither. As I was telling you on your live chat on YouTube, I was all about For All Mankind, and I loved it. Did you see it?
No, I haven't seen it yet, and I just don't have Apple. I want to get to it next.
Sure.
The thing about that, I'm curious because it's such a strange idea to me that you're going to do an alternate future or alternate history where we didn't go to the moon, and I find that odd, and I can't wait to see it. I love Ron Moore's stuff.
I won't tell you a thing about it, and other than I loved it. I thought it was amazing, and the acting was terrific. The stories were great. It was a fun. As a fan of alternate histories, I found it very, very intriguing.
Oh, that's good. Well, I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I look forward to discussing it with you, so that's cool. I'm trying to think of other... I saw Two Popes. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, that's good. That's another one I have not seen. I was going to watch it actually last night, and it's on Netflix now, so I'm going to...
Yeah.
I will check that out.
And I haven't seen Uncut Gems yet, but Matt Singer and I were, just like you have done in the past, extolling the virtues of A24 and what an amazing studio that is.
Their taste is incredible, and they're making movies. I think if you look at what A24 their output, whether you like their films or not, but you can't deny that they're at the forefront, the cutting edge of modern cinema in terms of new voices, and
yep.
They're making adult movies. They have impeccable taste. And
proving that there is room for that kind of film. It's not grossing the way that these films did 20 years ago, but I'm glad they're still being made, and they're finding a way to do it. And I don't know what their business model is and what to them is a successful release as far as box office or whatever.
Right.
But you're right. No, these are critically... They are adult movies, and they are the kind of movies that I think Scorsese was saying are films like this still being made in the wake of Marvel and the spectacle films. And like you said I believe it was today on your show, and I agreed with you, the major studios are in the spectacle business. They need to be, because of the cost of these movies that they're putting in. They got to make these big movies.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't mean that as any apology or anything like that. It's just that's the way their business model has gone. So thankfully there is A24 and the streaming networks that are stepping in the void, and I think producing these very interesting films.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, people always are talking about, the death of cinema and, superhero movies are clogging our multiplexes. I don't think that's true at all. There's incredible films being made all over the world, everywhere. Yes. You just have to look. It's such a weird thing because everyone's always bitching about, there's not. Yeah, there's, as I say on my show all the time, there's so much cool stuff around us now. You have to just seek it out and look for it. But there is, in terms of films, in terms of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, the genre, comics, all that stuff, there's so much great stuff out there. And it's different in that it doesn't become the cultural force that we were used to in the past. There's so much content, things stick around for a week or two and then are gone, unless they last 8 weeks and Baby Yoda becomes a meme and The Mandalorian crushes it. But even The Mandalorian, it's gone. It's gone. The new year, The Mandalorian was done on December 27th. It's coming back in the fall. So we're going to have 9 or maybe even 10 months of no Baby Yoda. No one's going to talk about Star Wars for a while, and on to the next.
It is interesting that it is coming back as quickly as it is, unlike other streaming shows where there usually is a 2-year gap or so between seasons.
Oh, yeah, Lost in Space Season 2.
Yeah, just dropped. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Well, Ms. Maisel. How long had we waited for Season 3, which I love that show. And there, it's funny, Howard Chaykin was like, Season 3, And I'm like, I don't know, man. I had a great time. I enjoyed the whole thing. I saw what was coming with the singer that she was, touring with, because it's like, all right, this is clearly a Johnny Mathis sort of pastiche, and that's cool. And I love that. I mean, that's brilliant that they did this. But yeah, I'm like, that was great. And also, and I was trying to figure out, because Jane Lynch's character is kind of based on Gertrude Berg, I believe is her name, who played Molly on the Goldbergs, the original Goldbergs from the early dawn of television.
Oh, okay.
A very popular kinescope and live action soap opera that focused on a Jewish family. And she, like Jane Lynch, played this blue collar character, but was living on Park Avenue, and was a very she wrote the show as well, starred in it, and was a very successful writer, producer, actor. And so, yeah, I kind of felt like that's who she was kind of doing a parody of in her own way. I mean, the character is very different than what Molly Goldberg represented on the Goldbergs and everything. But yeah, just her background lifestyle and that. And I guess she also was on Broadway in a very different way than what plays out on Ms. Maisel. And yeah, I just found all that intriguing, and I love that Lenny Bruce is a side character.
I love that. I mean, the whole history, yeah. I think it's great. And the show is so beautifully made.
Yes.
The cast, the direction, the set design.
The art direction, yeah, the clothes, everything, the soundtrack.
Yeah, it's so good. And you know, it's funny. It's really funny. Like, we're now in the habit of judging shows like, well, season 3, you know, it maybe not was good at season 2, or certainly not as good as season 1. But the fact that we're even getting a show as good as Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, we're judging television, the excellence of television right now. If you compare it to, say, the standard '80s television show that we grew up with, it's so far beyond anything we ever used to get on television. And our standards we just take it for granted that we're getting, whether it's a Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, or whether it's a Succession, or whether it's Watchmen, or Umbrella Academy, or whatever it is. The television that we're getting now is it's light years beyond what we're getting, and the way we judge it, like Howard Chaykin. You know, that's not as good. But you're still getting one of the best TV shows like ever.
I agree, man. And what are you telling me, that Fred Dreyer and Hunter wasn't worth the 9 seasons that it lasted on NBC?
I mean,
come on,
unbelievable, dude. I mean, think about that. It was Hunter.
But I'm so fascinated by those 30 years, I suppose, really, if you really do the math, of Universal Television. And just that factory, and how it just shit out these detective shows and procedurals and everything. And I love the Adam West pilot for Look Well that Conan O'Brien and Robert Smigel wrote. And it's like, who did you play? I played McBannon. Oh, wasn't that George Prepared? No, that was Banachek.
Right.
Oh, I thought that, they just got to go through a list of various 70s and 80s TV detectives before they get to Adam West's character. And it's, oh my God, I love that shit. And it's true. And the other thing thank God for YouTube. Ever since we had our conversation I think it was a year ago or so, when you told me about that book of TV movies and the history of TV movies.
Did you get that book?
Movies of the week. I did. And it's fantastic. And then I went on YouTube looking for so many of these movies, and so many of them are there.
Oh my God. I know. And
I love it. I love it.
It's especially, it's funny. Some of them are really good. The ones that were from the 70s. I mean, sure, they're budgetarily constrained, but good ideas. They went for it. I mean, it was craziness, and I think that's what I miss now. I mean, I'm really happy to see the new wave of genre directors that have come out, like whether Ari Aster. I was not a big fan of Midsommar, but I enjoyed Hereditary. I didn't love it, but I really did like another A24 director, the director of why am I drawing? It's late. I'm drawing a blank on his name, but
no problem.
But The Witch and Lighthouse, Robert Eggers.
Yes.
Robert Eggers. I mean, I loved The Witch, and while The Lighthouse, I didn't love it, I certainly respected it, and I'm like, wow, It's great that we're getting these kinds of movies. I can't wait to see what these filmmakers are going to do. And I like the fact that they don't just jump into the Hollywood system and go make another movie. You have Robert Eggers follows up The Witch with Lighthouse, which isn't exactly the most commercially minded movie in the world, but it certainly was well executed, and the way it was done, it's a vision. And I love that we live in that time. And I think it's great. And
no, I agree, man. And before the oversaturation of the streaming platforms, I think television is in the same place in terms of, there's still enough of a market that I think we'll get some interesting ideas. Like I said, I'm really excited for Mark at Netflix, Mark Miller, and some of the stuff that he's got in production, the people that he has working on it and stuff, the actors.
Oh,
I want to say I think Josh Duhamel is in Jupiter's Legacy.
Oh, that's great.
As one of the older heroes and stuff. Yeah, I think it's going to be great. So,
yeah, I mean, I love
cool.
that comic and what, Jupiter's Children? Is that the sequel?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, he's got so much to draw from. And after seeing, when I saw The Boys, I'm like, wow, now anything's possible on TV. Between watching The Expanse and The Boys, and I'm just like, wow, anything is possible. The level that people are working at, and even Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, I'm like, we're living in a golden age of genre TV. That's another reason why Star Trek is so disappointing to me.
Agreed. I agree. Dude, I know.
I mean, I look at this and I'm like, what the hell are you guys... do you have an original thought in your body and when you do, or your mind or whatever? And the stuff, these ideas that they come up with are just, they're pastiches of other things, and they don't seem to understand the original thing that they're ripping off. That's what's so amazing to me.
Agreed. No. It's, well, like I said, man, it's all, they're playing Star Trek. They're really not immersing themselves in understanding what made it great. And I don't know. I mean, again, here's hoping Picard is better, and some of these other original ideas that are coming, we'll see. I mean, two of our friends are working on one of the animated shows, and I hold out hope because I think they're talented people.
I do too, but I think the question that I have is, of course, television is only as good as your showrunner.
Yes.
The visionary, the writing room is only ultimately, they're beholden to their showrunner. And
True.
You really need visionary showrunners, and I feel like the Star Trek franchise has been given to people that had an opportunity to take it. Like Alex Kurtzman had the opportunity, and everyone knows that when he was writing Star Trek with Bob Orci, it was always, well, Bob Orci knows Star Trek, I don't. And everybody thinks they know what Star Trek is now, but they're looking back on it as this weird, kitschy artifact of the past. And they're not taking it seriously for its own sake. And everybody's been trying to change Star Trek over the last decade or the last 12 years into something else. And it's so strange to me, whereas you read the ancillary, whether it's the best novels and the best comic books, there's so many people that did understand Star Trek. And Kirsten Beyer, she wrote Voyager novels, and I thought pretty good Voyager novels.
Very good.
She's
novels,
part of this, but I know she was sort of marginalized the first two seasons of Discovery, and she's really instrumental in the Picard show. So hopefully we'll see a lot of that. But again, I just feel that again, it's like they're relying heavily on the Borg, and they're just delving into the easiest, most obvious thing to do. And I'm like, what a bummer that is. I mean, you're going back to the well with the Borg and the Romulans. I mean, First Contact and Nemesis. It's like, have you watched the show? I don't know.
Yeah, I hear you, man. No, I know. And we'll see. We'll find out in 2 weeks, absolutely. And we'll go from there, I suppose. Well, it is late, and I know you got to get up for Campia and everything. So, and your own show, in fact. Yeah. So, Robservations on YouTube.
Yes.
And also a frequent contributor to the John Campia show. All on YouTube and everything. And the occasional contributor to Inglorious Treksperts, one of my favorite podcasts out there that I listen to every week.
Oh, thank you. It's a lot of fun doing that show.
Can't get enough of it, man. God, I just heard the Dorothy Fontana tribute episode, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And it's a sad. And also didn't realize that Robert Walker Jr., Charlie X, passed away recently.
I know. We're losing all the Star Trek people. Thank God Shatner's still here. The guy's going to be 89 years old on March 22nd.
Wow, that's amazing.
89.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, holy shit, man.
That's crazy.
Great. It is crazy. And I saw him with Fuller and that 50th anniversary thing they did at San Diego for Star Trek in 2016.
Right.
And man, Shatner was just as motivated and excited about his life, and it shows. Orson Welles said this to Peter Bogdanovich: you need to have a purpose if you want to make it to your old age and still matter. You need a reason to get up in the morning.
Oh yeah.
And he made the comparison to the old conductors of classical orchestras and stuff, and that they, still struggle with arrangements and stuff and try to figure shit out. And it's like, no, that's right. That's what keeps you vital and everything. And Shatner's a perfect example of that. That guy just keeps on going.
Right.
And I'm so thrilled that he does. That's terrific.
Yeah, I mean, he goes to conventions and these events, and it's so great because, well, the alternative is to what? Stay at home?
Yeah.
He's got this fan base of people that love him, and that he can travel around the world and put smiles on people's faces and meet fans and change their lives, and he's certainly, I mean, he's putting out himself out there where he's traveling all over the world and doing all these things, and it's amazing. At 89, he's going to be.
Well, it's one of my favorite lines in Free Enterprise when he's like, I know people think I'm nuts and whatever he says. And he goes, and I know they think it's crazy to do this 6-hour version of Julius Caesar, but I think I can do it.
Yeah, I mean, that was in a nutshell. That's my philosophy of life. I think to myself, man, I always say I'm a middle-aged guy with one foot in his grave, but
yes.
I never thought I would be on YouTube talking to younger people or be a I don't know, somebody that people come to and say, you've really made my life enriched. I love your show. I love the community that you're building. And I'm like, well, that's fantastic. I really appreciate that. And I never thought that would be me, but I will take that. I'm connected. I've got a worldwide audience of very interesting people, and I get more and more subscribers every day, and people discover my show, and it's been really enriching. I really like it, and thank God. The one thing I can offer outside anyone else in my space is that I am making movies, and I do work in the industry, and I do have things going on. So that's at least something that I'm good about.
No, I think, hey man, I think, as I said, the journey is always interesting, and you're getting to live the best parts of it, and I'm glad it's all working out. And I think the projects that you have coming up are terrific, and yeah, the YouTube show that you do, because you're a guy that has worked in the industry and stuff, you've got a great inside perspective that can cut through the speculation bullshit that I hate about a lot of the other YouTube shows, where they just don't know. And it's obvious in the way that they present themselves. So, and at least you're honest when you say, hey, I don't know, but this is what I think and this is what I see. And I think they're interesting opinions. And again, sometimes based on your own experience. So
yeah,
well done.
I mean, I think it's so strange that there is a world out there where people are speculating about stuff everybody thinks they know how to make movies, which I think is such a strange idea. Like, I don't know how to do brain surgery. I like brain surgery. I'm happy there are doctors that do it, but I don't know anything about actually opening up someone's cranium and working on their brain. And yet, fans of movies also seem to think they have vast insight into the workings of the entertainment business, which I think is odd.
I completely agree. And like I said, that's why I don't watch. I mean, I'll check out somebody's YouTube show and be like, all right, that was fine. Because I'm always the one thing that, and I know you feel this way as well. We love this stuff and can't get enough of the information.
Right.
We are seeking good shows that cover the subjects that we like.
Yeah.
So there can never be enough Star Trek talk in my world.
No.
And I'm always looking for good shows. There aren't that many out there, and there's a lot of shit out there. I mean, it's just like everything. 90% of it is shit, and the other 10% is the stuff that's worth paying attention to. And we hope that we're in the right column when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I'll let you go, bud. I mean, like I said, I feel bad. I'm keeping you up till 1:30.
No, it's great. I love every time I talk to you. It's a rollicking good time.
I feel the same way, Rob, and I always appreciate you coming back. I'm sure we'll check back in. I don't know what the plan is. Are they going to break up the season of Picard, or are they going to dole it all out in 10 weeks?
I don't know. I mean, I would assume 10 weeks. I would guess so. And I mean, I know that I read somewhere that Robert Picardo was going to come back as the holographic doctor on season 2.
Well, there you go.
And I'm like, okay, well, let's see how that goes. I mean, look, I think this is so strange because I can't imagine a Star Trek show that people are primed to love. Even me, with my burning hatred of everything that is Star Trek Discovery, I can't wait to see Picard. I want to love it. And
Me too,
if it's
buddy.
not great, it's going to be, it's going to be like, Jesus every year goes by and Jesus doesn't come back. and it's been pretty disappointing for the last 2,000 years. And I think that if this Picard show, I'm not saying it would be as disappointing if our Lord and Savior doesn't return, but it's going to be pretty damn disappointing if it's not great.
Dude, I'm sure you felt Insurrection, more so than Nemesis, Insurrection, I remember leaving and going, that's it? And I got to wait at least 3 years for the next Star Trek movie?
I mean,
what the fuck?
yeah, it was like, the funny thing is it didn't live up to its title. What insurrection? You're in a nebula and you have a dispute with another commander about a stupid idea that they're going to wreck a planetary system. I mean, the very thing that is causing what you want, you're going to destroy that ecosystem? It was the dumbest shit ever. And
I bought the Michael Pillar book.
It's really interesting, isn't it?
And I haven't had a chance to sit down and crack it open, but I'm looking forward to it, man. And I certainly read Altman's 2-volume 50-year mission.
Yeah.
Mark's and I forget his co-author's name. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that was excellent and everything. And no, I'm fascinated. I mean, I like I said, can never get enough Trek content to satisfy.
No,
myself,
and there's a lot of. There's a lot of good stuff in there, a lot of interesting stories.
Cool.
But that Insurrection book is really, even if you don't like Star Trek, it's a really interesting look at how does a movie get written and how also can a movie go off the rails based on the talent involved. Because you're trying to service all these different kinds of people, and it's really interesting.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, like I said, we'll check back in a few months and have some more Star Trek Picard talk and whatever other developments happen in the nerd sphere.
Oh yeah,
look at that, man! We 3 hours and we didn't even talk about Skywalker. I figure we're both sick of talking about Skywalker.
Oh my god!
At this point.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's all right. Well, Mandalorian, like I said, was good enough, and we'll see what happens next year. So I'm not, or then later this year, we'll see what happens. But, all right, Rob, I'll let you go. Thanks a lot.
All right, it was great to talk to you.
All right, I'll leave it there. That was great, buddy. And like I said, I don't want to keep you up. So if you want to hustle out, it's cool.
For you. What is it, like 3:30 in the morning?
Yeah, but Another fun chat with Robert Meyer Burnett. We stayed on the phone for about another half hour after that, just BSing. I love talking to Rob, and I appreciate the feedback when Rob comes on. It seems like he is a Word Balloon favorite as well. So, yeah, we'll check in on Star Trek Picard and see what we think in a couple weeks. I'll also be talking soon again with Ashley Robinson and Jason Inman. They've got a new Jupiter Jet volume coming out soon, and I'm going to help them promote it. But also, it's my opportunity to talk to them about Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard. Can't help it, kids. I love it. Maybe I should do a Word Balloon episode watch. Would you guys want me to do that? I'd be interested if you think that's something that you'd want to hear on separate episodes of Word Balloon. John at wordballoon.com if you've got any thoughts on that. Thanks a lot for listening today. All brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you greatly, League, again for your wonderful support via Patreon. If you want to subscribe to Word Balloon, it's patreon.com/wordballoon. That will take you to my Patreon page. But thank you greatly, League of Word Balloon listeners, for your support. This episode of Word Balloon also brought to you by Aftershock Comics. They are shaking things up at your local shop right now. They've got new titles on the way, like John Layman's The Man Who Effed Up Time, Zach Thompson's Undone by Blood, God Killers by Mark Sable. They will go along with other great books like The Great Dark Arc from Cullen Bunn and Juan Doe, Dark Red from Tim Seeley, Animosity from Marguerite Bennett and Raphael De La Tour, Baby Teeth, Donny Cates and Gary Brown's wonderful series, and great stuff from Garth Ennis, including A Walk Through Hell with him and Gordon Suzuka. Their catalog has lots of great titles by some of my favorite people in comics, and yours as well. Go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on how to order these books through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. Thanks again for listening. More great Word Balloon to come this weekend. I'm going to be posting an interview with Jim Zub in just an hour or two. And thanks a lot for, as always, listening to Word Balloon and checking out what I got here every week at wordballoon.com. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2020.